Hello, welcome to the Fanfic Majesty. If you want more content, you can follow me on Patreon. I will be uploading more content on there that will be exclusive. The link is in the description. Please support me.
1SS Chapter 1 3 Days Next Chapter Advertisement. Wake up, pervert. Someone woke him up. Hayden opened his eyes in a daze, rubbing his eye sockets to see who was in front of him. It turned out that Robin was in front of him. Her palms were about to touch his face, and her little hand was waving. "It's Robin Sauce," Hayden said weakly after traveling for 3 days. At this moment, he was holding a stick-like white tap in his chest, and there was a short chain hanging on the end. Sleeping in a hammock, he couldn't figure it out. He then sat up and leaned Dao against the tree beside him. 3 days ago, Hayden returned to his home after moving bricks for the day. He is closing his eyes and relaxing his whole body comfortably in the fragrant bubble bath. As a result, I got here after opening my eyes the next second. There was no sign of it, and he hadn't noticed it at all. As for why I know that this is the world of One Piece, not his original world. That's because after he opened his eyes, there were 2 small hands coming from his body in his sight. It grew out of his own body, and his arms emerged like a pink and tender flower. In the warm bath that seemed to have a strange fragrance, Hayden looked up and stared at the little flower, slowly growing from his shoulder. Advertisement. Hayden looked left and right. He was not well. Immediately after his sight, one of the 2 small hands rushed towards his neck, and the small hand held the neck part. The other small hand plunged into the water abruptly. Before he had time to do anything, he could only give instinctive response, not daring to move. Then I heard a beautiful but tender voice. "Name, how did you get in?" The tone was flat.
My name is Hayden. Hayden didn't know why he seemed to be okay, and he replied. Next, I found that this place was obviously not my home before I closed my eyes.
The wall of the bathroom in front of you is made of large blocks of completely cut stone. There seems to be a window opened on the front wall, and the bathing pool under this body is not its own bathtub.
The mindless Hayden was immediately confused, raised his hand from the water and scratched the back of his head.
Where am I? After speaking, he turned his head to look at the source of the sound. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. There was a little girl in a long crimson dress, as if she had just taken a shower, with some wet hair that was shiny and black. The dull Hayden looked at the raised right hand before he noticed. Why is my voice different? Why is the hand smaller? Immediately he ignored the little hand that emerged from his shoulder, and then quickly raised his left hand and looked at it over and over. I looked under my body again, and I could see my current body in the water from the floating foam gap. I became a kid. What? Advertisement. Hayden, who was tragically poisoned by Jin Yuan, was sitting with Robin at the dining table on the first floor of her aunt's house. He twisted his face, with a bath towel wrapped around his small body, and could not help sitting on a chair at the dining table with his legs clamped, his 2 short feet dangling from time to time. And the culprit who poisoned Hayden was sitting on the chair next to him. His face was calm, as if she hadn't done it just now. Just now, under Robin's intimidation, Hayden reluctantly pulled out a reason to convince Robin. After all, there is nothing strange in this world, and it seems that Robin didn't think it was strange to see Hayden, a harmless child, and he was killed. Hayden also obtained information about where he is now from the exchange with Robin just now, and also the name of the little girl in front of him, Nicole Robin.
Nicole Robin, a character in the comics One Piece, a crew member of the protagonist Straw Hat Boy Luffy, became an archaeologist at the age of only 8. When he was a child, he even ate the devil fruit and became a flower fruit ability. After seeing One Piece, he knew that Robin was a bit black-bellied, but he didn't expect she was so black-bellied when she was a child.
Hayden couldn't tell. He felt uncomfortable. Although the whole thing is unbelievable, the 2 hands that emerged from the chest illustrate the truth very well. Boom boom boom. There was a knock on the wooden door of the house not far from the dining table. Robin. Open the door to me quickly. It was Robin's mean and bitter aunt's voice, and Robin's aunt went home. Robin, who was still not emotionally fluctuating just now, immediately panicked. The small body jumped off the chair, and quickly lowered his voice to urge Hayden. Pervert, hurry up, you should go. Hey, wait. Hayden, who was also a child, was pulled from the chair by Robin. "I don't have any clothes." Robin sauce. Knowing the situation, he also lowered his voice and hurriedly said. Although no one knew him when he came to another world, he didn't dare to let him run out naked. Robin's motion, pulling Hayden toward the back window of the house, stopped. His expression seemed to be thinking about something. Advertisement what came to mind at the moment. "Pervert, follow me," she said, her little hand holding Hayden never let go. To be honest, Hayden's current strength is not as strong as Robin's. Robin, who has eaten devil fruit since she was a child, is now 8 years old and is now able to use it proficiently. Hayden was naturally dragged away by Robin passively. After reaching the second floor, Robin took Hayden to her room. The dimly lit room looked a bit dilapidated and cramped, but the bed inside and the place beside the bed were unexpectedly clean. Robin pulled out a piece of her gray dress from a wooden box beside the bed, then turned and handed it to Hayden. "Pervert, put it on quickly," she said. Hayden stunned. 3 question marks popped up on his head. "Isn't this your clothes? I don't want to wear them." He didn't even think about rejecting it directly. Women's clothing is impossible. After a while, the sky outside the house was like a sunset. Hayden hid behind Robin in Robin's little skirt. Robin walked in front of him with a big loaf, and the two walked through the streets of the town. At this time, the people working in the town also went home one after another, or bought some food from the small shops on the street, and the town seemed very lively at this time. It's just that people who came and went all avoided Robin's route, and Robin and Hayden were in a vacuum in a small circle. This obvious phenomenon was naturally noticed by Hayden, who was hiding in hiding. Unexpectedly, when Robin was a child, the people around him were so ignorant. Just because they had power that they couldn't understand, they were treated like this. Walking behind Robin, he couldn't help but look forward to Robin. Robin's expression has not changed a bit. This kind of thing has become accustomed to her. Chapter 2 Zhanpakudao, Quincy. Shu previous chapter next chapter. Advertisement the first night after the crossing came quietly, which was confusing.
After coming out of Robin's house, Robin took Hayden to a coast where almost no one came. This was where Robin often came by herself.
Robin learned from the communication with Hayden that he is not from this island, and he does not have parents yet. "I can't let him live in my aunt's house, nor can I trouble the doctor and them." She couldn't figure out a way. She could only take Hayden to stay here temporarily for one night, and make plans during the day tomorrow. Afterwards, Robin and Hayden shared the loaf together, and told Hayden to be careful and then go home first, otherwise his aunt would definitely have to talk about her again. After that, Hayden was left alone, a kid who was about the same height as Robin at this time. He walked to a river and saw the reflection in the river clearly through the bright moonlight. With thin arms and legs, his face is the same as when he was a child, handsome, and on the whole it looks like a kid, nothing special. "Wait. Where's my white hair I rely on?" Hayden suddenly noticed a slight difference. The hair that was dyed white by him turned back to black. This is the hair he finally made up his mind to dye. He couldn't believe that his face was about to fall into the river, and Hayden was a little desperate. However, he can only do this at this point. Just don't know if the Tony teacher in this pirate world is good. There is another problem with this little kid's body. It is said that people look forward to growing up when they are young, and look forward to returning to childhood when they grow up. But I'm not yet old enough to want to be a child again. Happy life hasn't started yet. Advertisement at this time. Hayden, who just wanted to close his eyes and hold water to wash his face, noticed something again. With his eyes closed, he realized that there seemed to be a white stick floating in the space of his mind. Unlike the dark feeling of closing my eyes in the past, it seems to be playing a 1080p picture in my head at this time. In the endless white space, a black round platform floats in it, and the stick floats on the platform and turns. After he noticed it, Hayden didn't even think about it, and read the words silently in his heart. After a moment, he felt the weight on his hands, and he opened his eyes. The moment after receiving the stick, a message was immediately engraved on Hayden's mind. Open black lens bracket Shantae close black lens bracket initial state. He immediately understood what the white stick in his hand was. It is from the shallow fight in the comic book, Reaper, the embryonic form of every Zhanpakudao knife, and the foundation of Reaper's power. Suddenly, Hayden's bewildered little mind seemed to be greatly comforted. After crossing, he became a little kid, and he went into the world of One Piece, and the start was still in O'Hara. And depending on Robin's age, the O'Hara incident should be approaching. How can this small body survive under the demon-slaying order? Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Confusion, anxiety, and various negative emotions were all mixed in Hayden's mind. At this moment, he was very grateful that the Golden Finger plugin went online that night when he crossed, otherwise he was afraid that he would collapse if he couldn't last a few days. At any rate, before crossing, there is a small place to live, and the game is playing, and there are tons of happiness. Although watching novels, cartoons, etc., it is very cool, after reading it, I will imagine that I have traveled to that world and embarked on the pinnacle of life. But, if there is no gold finger after crossing, Hayden couldn't help trembling, and there was a chill in his heart. Fortunately, Goldfinger went online immediately. Thinking of this, Hayden couldn't help licking the shallow dab in his hand. Advertisement, didn't you mean? You have everything you need to lick the dog to the end. After all, from the Grim Reaper comics I've seen before, if you want to awaken your Zhanpakudao, you have to make a good relationship with your Zhanpakudao. Hit the shallow lick and feel comfortable, and then it will tell itself its name. It's just to come to a sense of it, why this shallow hit seems to be different from the comics. Wasn't this shallow hitting a knife at the beginning? Why am I a stick? How should I practice this? Should I practice the Zhanpakudao? He didn't understand. Hayden closed his eyes and wanted to check the subconscious space again. At this time, the endless space of nothingness had quietly changed. On the floating round platform where Asada was just now, there should be nothing after removing Asada, but now there is a big tree standing on it. A big tree that can only be surrounded by 2 or 3 people. The trunk is divided into 3 parts. The first part is called Reaper, the second part is called Quincy, and the third part is called Void. The 2 branches of Quincy and Shu are still unlocked, and the branch of Death has been unlocked. The Grim Reaper branch is divided into 5 lines: Zhan, Fist, Walk, Ghost, and Zhanpakudao. Now only one thing, Shantae, of the Zhanpakudao line is lit up in the whole tree. Every unlocking thing requires corresponding points, and points are obtained by defeating the enemy. According to the information transmitted by this skill tree, 100 points can be exchanged for defeating enemies whose total value of 10 million Baileys is judged by the system. And redeem everything. Hayden looked at the points needed for each skill densely packed in the tree, and he was dumbfounded. The points needed were not the points he could get as a kid. However, Hayden noticed that he still had 100 initial points. According to the novice welfare prompted by the system, a small skill can now be revealed from Zhanchuan Gogi. At this time, Hayden, who walked to the shore, didn't know which one to choose. He found a big rock and leaned on him. He planned to sit down and think about it. By the way, he will be here tonight. O'Hara. O'Hara. Advertisement. I remember that in the comics it happened around Robin's age, but I didn't know the exact date. Tomorrow, you must find a mask to cover your face. In the event of the O'Hara incident, you must not let anyone in the Navy or anyone in the world government see your face. However, even if he escaped the demon-slaying order, the probability of going to the sea to survive is almost the same as it is now. The small body estimates that a big waiver will disappear from the sea. What he really thought was that Hayden, who had a painful brain, looked back at the dense skill tree. Slicing. This line is divided into 2 types: slashing and kendo, with many tricks. Fist. This line includes instant coax, 1 bone, 2 bones, and so on. Go. This one has instant steps, flashing flowers, empty cicadas, and so on. Ghost. This one has a lot of skills: breaking the road, binding the road, and replied. Hayden couldn't help but squeezed his chin and frowned, thinking that which point would be beneficial to the current situation. He was very entangled with only 100 points. The sea breeze tonight is very noisy, and there is a refreshing smell of the sea. Hayden, with his back leaning on a large rock, quietly stared at the vast expanse of the sea in front of him, with little stars hanging on the dark sky. Now that I have come to this fantasy world full of dreams and friendship. In such a magnificent world of pirates, how can you not get a good experience and experience the thrill of sailing through the waves? A wave of pride rose in Hayden's heart. Following the surging waves, he stood up with his hands on his hips, and the corners of his mouth raised unconsciously. Ha 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 ha. At this time, the sea breeze, symbolizing freedom, blew past, blowing the little skirt worn by Hayden. Huh? Damn it. He was so frightened that he sat down quickly, pulling the corners of the skirt tightly with both hands. Chapter 3 The Nine of Bound Dao. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. The next day, Hayden crossed to the second day of Pirate World. Hayden and Robin were waiting in the clearing in the small forest at this time. Robin was sitting on a big round tree stump, holding a thick book in his hand and reading quietly. On the way here, with the help of Robin's ability, Hayden took a few clothes from the friendly villager's house and changed it, and took off his long skirt. Now he was standing on the grass not far from Robin, holding Shatter in both hands and slashing forward with force, and the chain at the end of Shatter made a slight collision sound from time to time. He still hasn't decided how to use the 100 points. Hayden's plan today is to practice first, and then go to the town at noon to see if there is any information available from newspapers, then find a mask to wear, and come here in the afternoon. Practice swordsmanship. Now that you have come to this world, if you want to live easily and lively, then your own strength is indispensable. Although Hayden had never learned kendo, swordsmanship, or slashing skills, according to the methods in every anime he had seen, he must have been practicing these basic tricks. After practicing to turn the moves into the instinctive reaction of your body, let alone whether this method is right or not, even if it can improve a little physical fitness. Hayden is the kind of person who likes to plan what to do at what time of the day, and he must finish when he does it. Sweat wet Hayden's short hair unknowingly, and slowly slid towards his eyelashes, blocking his vision. Feeling that his body seemed to have reached its limit at this time, Hayden decided to take a break and stopped waving his hands for more than an hour. As soon as I stopped, I felt that both hands were about to lose consciousness, as if the arms were filled with lead, heavy. He breathed heavily, wiped the sweat from his face with his clothes, and decided to rest for 10 minutes before continuing. After making a decision in his mind, Hayden walked over to Robin's place. Robin, who was looking down reading, noticed Hayden's movement. She moved her nose and said with a disgusting expression, "Pervert, you are all wet."
Hee hee. Hayden smiled silly and leaned against Robin by the way, sitting on the stump with his butt on the stump, lying back and sleeping on it. Robin glanced at him for nothing but said nothing.
Hayden didn't care either, and closed his eyes after lying on the stump. Robin put on a look of dislike him, but didn't do anything, and sat on the stump with Hayden. Hayden has not been afraid of his demon ability, and will play with himself, which is enough for Robin. Advertisement. For a while, the atmosphere suddenly quieted down. Robin continued to look at the book in his hand, and Hayden, who was lying behind, closed his eyes, seemed to have a trace of liquid coming out of his mouth. However, at this moment, in the woods not far from Robin and Hayden, there were a few children hiding behind the trees. "Look, that," said a four-eyed kid pointing at the two of them. A little kid wearing a turban answered, "Found a monster." "Huh? That monster actually has a companion?" the little girl among them asked strangely, noticing that there was someone behind the monster. F***K. The last shaggy boy didn't care. The four of them looked at each other, and all shrugged and laughed. Immediately afterwards, the little kid who took the lead shouted, "Start attacking." With an order, the four little kids took the tomatoes in their hands and threw them toward Robin and Hayden. Robin, with his head down, seemed to perceive something abnormal. He turned his head to look at it, but had no time to evade. The next tomato just hit Robin's head. "It hurts." Robin couldn't help but yelled. The tomato burst, and the red juice immediately stuck to Robin's head, slowly running down his cheeks. Seeing the four little kids recruited by the monsters, they walked out of the woods to reveal their figures, standing on the clearing not far from them, pointing at Robin and laughing. Robin then noticed that it was the four little kids who used to trouble her before, frowned and stood up. The four little kids who were on the opposite side shouted together again, "Yukai! Yukai! Yukai!" He slapped his hands with a proud look. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. The voices of the four at the same time were just loud enough to attract Hayden's attention. Hayden, who was so tired that he almost fell asleep after closing his eyes, opened his eyes and stood up directly because of the unfamiliar sound.
What seems to be mocking the little kid dancing on the opposite side?
What's stuck on Robin's head in front of him? The first time he put the situation in front of him into Hayden in his mind, he immediately judged what had happened. The kids in town bullied Robin right in front of him. Uncontrollable anger suddenly rose in Hayden's heart, and his face instantly became gloomy. Afterwards, Hayden noticed that Robin in front of him raised his left hand, and he immediately understood that this was a pre-movement of Robin's ability. But Hayden held back his emotions for a while, stood in front of Robin, and stopped Robin. Advertisement Robin will just scare them with his power, and then those little kids will run away crying, and after a while they will come to Robin again. Hayden wanted to give the other side a deep memory. "Hey, you guys," he yelled to the 4 kids in front of him, and raised his right hand on his shoulder. "I'll say the next thing again, you guys come over honestly and apologize to Robin." He cocked his head after a pause for a few seconds and continued. "Maybe I will let you go." Hayden told them the fact that it was over in a very flat tone. However, after seeing the monster's companion stand up and say this, the 4 little kids who were already laughing so hard suddenly laughed louder. The little boy with glasses holding his belly and reluctantly said, "What? Want us to apologize to the monster?" "Ha ha ha. What the hell? You Kai's companion, then it's also a monster." The kid wearing a turban thought for a while and said, "Let's just say, the monster's brain is really not normal." The 4 little kids didn't care about Hayden's words at all, and laughed together after they finished speaking. Hayden just silently looked at the 4 kids on the opposite side, each of them happily comparing their faces. Just seeing this scene in the comics, Hayden couldn't stand it in his heart, not to mention that things were happening right in front of his eyes. Hayden, who couldn't bear it, would do whatever he thought of. Immediately, he sang silently in his mouth, "Destroy yourself, the black dog of Rondinini. After reading it, it will be completely burnt and cut off your throat." 9 Bound Dao Blow. The deep words activated the ancient technique.
At this moment, the spiritual pressure has not yet reached the state of being able to materialize, and a red light that is visible only to him suddenly appeared on Hayden's body.
Robin standing behind saw that there seemed to be an invisible force trapping the 4 kids on the opposite side, unable to move at all. The 4 little kids who were still dancing suddenly froze and couldn't support them without their feet on the ground. They only fell to the ground one after another. The 4 little boys who stiffly fell on the ground were almost frightened out of their hearts at this moment. She couldn't speak, she could only cry loudly in her head, and big tears leaked from her fixed eye sockets. Advertisement. The 4 little kids watched Hayden slowly approaching them with a stick, and the fear in their hearts increased a little. Hayden, who was angry for a while, saw 4 little kids on the ground. The funny appearance of the little kids calmed his emotions. "Are you honest?" Hayden crouched in the middle of the 4 of them, and asked with a shallow tap. He did not get a response. "Huh? Speak." He increased his voice and poked again, strangely. The 4 little kids tried hard to move, only to find that the tears and nasal mucus on their faces combined. Hayden noticed the little kids' eyes rolling hard in the crying situation. He seemed to understand. This bondage made them speechless. Mine. Hayden laughed at himself. He hurriedly said sorry, but his expression didn't show a hint of embarrassment. He went on to say, "Next I will say, if you understand, roll your eyes, understand?" Immediately, the 4 of them rolled their eyes together. "Well, then when I let you go, you have to apologize to Robin. Then, if I meet you again in the future, do you know what will happen?" Hayden looked at the 4 little boys one by one, with a standard smile on his face. The 4 immediately rolled their eyes again, expressing their understanding. "Okay. Then solution." Hayden felt the sincerity in their hearts, and then made a gesture and untied the way. The next moment, the 4 little kids who felt their bodies were able to move quickly got up. They dared not stick to the ground, and ran so loudly that they flew into the woods and ran away crying. Before Hayden caught one, the 4 little kids ran away. No one was visible. Seeing the smoke and dust being lifted up, he nodded his head. The current level can only release the bound Dao once is the limit. I lost. Doing only half of things makes him feel uncomfortable. At this time, Robin, who was in the stump, walked behind Hayden at some point. Hayden just wanted to turn around to look at Robin, but he greeted Robin with a silent hug. He didn't know if it was good, but he let Robin lean on him with a blank expression. Chapter 4 Tree of Omniscience Previous chapter Next chapter. Advertisement. After that, it quickly reached noon, and Hayden, who was rolling around and imprisoning Robin, took her to O'Hara's town. With the help of Robin again, Hayden got lunch from the hospitable villagers, the newspaper of the day, and a mask. Then he returned to the clearing in the woods. After the break at noon, the afternoon is the same training as the morning. In a blink of an eye, it quickly came to the evening, and today's training should also be here. In order to make Hayden's supper possible, Robin took Hayden to her place and told him to wait outside and bring him out food after the meeting. So Hayden sat on the side outside of Aunt Robin's house, sitting on the wooden box against the wall, staring at the island town not far away in a daze. In the evening when the sun was pouring, little smoke rose from the roofs of the columns of stone and brick houses. In the setting sun, Hayden couldn't tell whether it was illusion or reality. He couldn't help but leaned back against the wall behind him, and looked through today's newspaper again. It seemed that there was no useful information on it. If apart from the tree of all-knowing on the island and Robin's devil fruit, he still hasn't the feeling of crossing the pirate world. At this time, under the warmth of the setting sun, Hayden felt tired, and he couldn't help but stretched out and leaned back against the wall. Looking at the scenery in front of me and sighing, it seems that today is also a peaceful O'Hara day. Pervert, you can come in. In a daze, Hayden heard a familiar voice, turned his head to look. Robin was standing there. Oh, here comes. He jumped out of the wooden box and walked towards Robin, then followed Robin into the place after crossing Robin's aunt's house. At this time, there seemed to be no signs of anyone else in the room, and Hayden, who was sitting at the dining table, quickly figured out the situation. Curiously looking around, he will be able to take a good look at the decoration style of this different world, and everything in the pirate world he finds very novel. The place where I live is quite large. From the outside, it looks like there are 3 floors. The walls are all stone bricks, and the interior decoration style is basically wood. Here you are, eat. Advertisement. Robin, who was also sitting at the table, called Hayden at this time. Hayden quickly regained his senses, and immediately put the mask and lighter he had been wearing on the side of the dining table, looking at the bread and jam placed in front of him. Robin didn't say any more after speaking. Although Robin's expression was as calm as usual, Hayden noticed that there seemed to be a slight depression in her mood. Hayden, who had just wanted to say something, didn't know whether to speak or not, so he had to eat the bread in front of him with Robin silently. After a while, Robin, who was full first, waited for Hayden to eat well. After finishing the table, he silently began to do housework. Looking at the depressed Robin in front of him, Hayden really didn't know what to do at this time, staring blankly at Robin, who was not tall enough to step on the bucket and stand by the sink to wash the dishes. In a short time, Hayden's mind came up with the experience of Robin as a child in the comics in his memory. The stunned Hayden jumped off the chair and looked around. He found a bucket and found a rag. He knelt on the floor and wiped the wooden floor with the rag. Robin naturally noticed Hayden's movements, and Hayden, who was always smiling, was wiping the floor with no expression on his face. At the moment when Robin was washing the dishes with several hands using flowers and fruits, all the movements of her hands stopped. At this moment, a complex emotion appeared in her heart, and tears dripped into the sink unconsciously. Sometimes silence is the best way to get along. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. After both of them quietly finished their housework, Robin, who was going to return the book today, took Hayden to the library on the island. This is the all-knowing tree library and archaeological research institute built on large trees over 5,000 years old. The two walked on the stone brick road, approaching the tree of all-knowing little by little. This tree can basically be said to be in every corner of the island. As long as you look up, you can see the tree. Hayden and the local Robin who have passed through have already reached the door of the library, at the foot of the tree of omniscience. The short distance seemed to dispel some of Robin's sadness, and the atmosphere between the two returned to a normal state. Hayden, who looked like a tourist at the moment, was already shocked and almost leaned back to the ground. Under his feet, he could feel the absurdity of the canopy covering the entire sky. Robin, who has lived here since childhood, is accustomed to it. She walked in the front and opened the door of the library. Hayden, who was standing next to him, was still looking up at the tree of all-knowing above his head. After holding the book and opening the door, the polite Robin greeted, "Good day. Dr. Kloba, borrow your book." Advertisement. Suddenly, bang, bang, bang. The sound of firecrackers sounded in the dark environment. Immediately, the lights were suddenly turned on again. "Congratulations, Robin. That's amazing. Robin is worthy of a genius." "Congratulations, Robin." The colorful ribbons floated down from their heads like celestial flowers, and the archaeologists of O'Hara gathered together. Everyone was happy for Robin with a sincere smile on their faces. Robin was standing at the door holding the book and didn't understand what was going on. Hayden, who was still focusing on the Tree of Omniscience, was really taken aback.
Among them, the old curator of the library, Dr. Kloba, stood in the middle of the crowd. He was the doctor with the strange clover-style hair. He smiled and said to Robin, "Robin, the doctoral exam a few days ago, you got full marks pass. From today, you will be an archaeologist.
We also prepared cakes for you. From today, you can study with us." Dr. Kloba continued and took out a badge. "Take it. This is the scholar's badge. Wear it, Robin." Robin, who was puzzled, learned that she had become an archaeologist, finally smiled on her face. Her mouth grew so big that she couldn't close her together. At this time, a very chesty big sister noticed Hayden next to Robin and said, "Robin, this is your friend. Hey. Could it be your boyfriend?" "Ah ha ha ha." Yudao's voice mixed in the crowd and teased Robin. When Robin wearing a badge heard this, his face flushed suddenly, and he was embarrassed and said, "This is a good friend I just made. His name is Hayden." Hayden, who felt like he was okay next to him, was immediately blushed and said shamelessly, "Hey, I am Robin's new boyfriend." Let go of Robin's sauce." Hayden was shy with his hand on the back of his head, and his ears were twisted by the small hands on his shoulders before he finished speaking. Seeing this scene, the archaeologists surrounded by the two of them suddenly laughed again. Surrounded by a group of people much taller than him, Hayden was a little embarrassed, and Robin, who was in a good mood, didn't feel anything. Dang. 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 Advertisement. Dr. Kloba stood in front of a mapboard and knocked on the board with a slender pole. "Listen to Robin. You have to remember how to be a good scholar. The so-called knowledge is the past, and this Tree of Omniscience has countless documents sent here from all over the world. This is an extremely precious cultural treasure for all mankind, and there is nothing in history that we do not understand. Remember, studying archaeology in such a place is your greatest pride." After speaking, Dr. Kloba rubbed Robin's head with a kind smile. Robin raised his head and looked at the doctor in front of him, and said his long-cherished wish, "Doctor, I want to study the blank history." Dr. Kloba was so scared that his eyes jumped out. No, absolutely not. Why? As long as you study the historical text, don't you understand what happened in the blank 100 years? Dr. Kloba was so shocked that he was about to lose his footing. Interpreting the text of history is a crime you should know. He regained his senses and said harshly, "But aren't you studying the historical text? Robin, how do you know this?" Dr. Kloba's face suddenly sank. The archaeologists around do not know what to do. The same expression sinking was also Hayden, who was next to him. Feeling that this would be okay, he was still curiously looking around the furnishings in the library. However, the scene in front of him suddenly reminded him of the comics that belonged to this scene. The O'Hara incident, the Navy's order to kill Demon. The life-threatening event is coming soon, just a few days later. Chapter 5 O'Hara Fireworks Previous Chapter Next Chapter. Advertisement, Robin. The archaeologists who could not help surrounding Robin and the curator, they heard the words of Robin and their faces were invariably oozing cold sweat, frowning. It would be okay if only they knew the text of the history. In the same way, this is the path that each of them chooses for themselves, and they know what fate they will face if things are revealed one day. But let a kid join them. Indeed, you have the knowledge of a competent scholar, Robin. With a solemn expression, Dr. Kloba squatted down and said, facing Robin with his hands on her shoulders, "What we are doing is very dangerous research, and we are all ready to drop our heads." The doctor's voice became more and more severe. "This became the law of the world 800 years ago, and there have been countless people in history who have paid the price of their lives for this. The scholars who had gathered together for Robin's sake became tighter in the tense atmosphere. Hayden, who hugged Shoji with a mask on his waistband, was blocked from the crowd. Only Dr. Kloba and Robin seemed to be sobbing. Hayden, who was about the same height as Robin, squeezed into the circle from the seams very hard. After hearing Dr. Kloba's warning, Robin's deflated mouth couldn't help but tears in his eyes. "This will be able to see Hayden clearly. See you again." Dr. Kloba then said to Robin, "By the way, the only person in the world who can interpret ancient characters is O'Hara, and we can't look back." Speaking of this, Dr. Kloba's voice suddenly rose again. "You swear to the Tree of Omniscience now. If you approach the basement next time, you will automatically stop your qualifications to enter the Research Institute and Library." The tone appeared. He came from this library director and intellectual authority. In the blink of an eye, the time inside the library seemed to freeze. Robin and the surrounding scholars were stunned by the doctor's momentum. After a while, the stupefied Robin pushed aside the crowd abruptly, buried his head and ran outside, neither the doctors nor the Hayden who was still behind. All that remained were the silent people in the Tree of All-Knowing. Before Hayden had time to catch up, he stood at the gate just a few steps away and saw Robin had run out of sight and disappeared into the darkness. "Hey, let her go. I don't know when." Dr. Kloba will stand behind Hayden and sigh. "Okay." Hayden stood quietly at the gate without saying anything. Thinking of Robin's appearance just now, he felt that this kind of moment should let her be a little quieter by herself. Advertisement after Dr. Kloba and Hayden stood silently at the gate for a short time. Dr. Kloba, who was standing behind him, spoke with a hesitation on his expression and said, "Hayden, right. It's late now, kid. Where are you in town? Do you want to send you back?" His tone quickly changed to the weird tone of talking to children. No, thank you. I can go back by myself." With a small body and a speechless expression like a small adult, Hayden looked up at the doctor with the weird clover haircut. "Well, be careful on the road. You can come and play with Robin again that day." Dr. Kloba smiled and waved his hands and said to Hayden. Hearing this, Hayden's expression became even more speechless, and it made him feel like he was back in kindergarten again. "Worship." Hayden rolled his eyes and said goodbye, and then stepped outside the house.
Wait. Hayden, who had just walked out of the door, suddenly thought of something and stopped, and his little hand hurriedly propped on the door that had not been completely closed. "What's wrong?" Dr. Kloba, who closed the door, felt Hayden's movement, and opened the door again, looking down at him and asked, Can I take 2 pieces of the cake on the table?" Hayden held the shallow tap in his left hand, and pointed his right hand at the cake for Robin on the table not far behind the doctor. "Doctor, do you know how to make fireworks? Today is the day when Robin is certified as an archaeologist, so this also means that it is likely that there will only be a few days of peaceful life. After this, even if we were lucky enough to take Robin and the 2 of us to escape from O'Hara, and then escape the Demon Slayer order, the next days would not be as calm as it is now. The sea is simply a hell for the weak and a heaven for the strong." Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Knowing the general situation in the future, Hayden understands what they will face next, and can only try to make Robin happy. Today is the day when she is qualified and it is worth celebrating. Fortunately, there are not many roads in this town. Although it was getting late, Hayden, who was walking on the road in the town in the dark, would not lose his way. There is no entertainment in the town at night, and the streets are quiet and peaceful. Only the orange lights from the windows of the stone brick houses on both sides, the laughter from time to time in the ear, and the sound of arguing about something. This ordinary and strange island town gave Hayden walking through it, revealing a sense of calm before the storm. Thinking of this, Hayden couldn't help speeding up his pace, and this inexplicable feeling seemed to urge him. Before at the Quanjishu, Hayden asked the doctors to help him make a cloth bag to hold her, and put her in new clothes, or else she would be outside in the sun all day long. At the same time, this also allows him to put Shallow on his back for easy movement. Holding the packed cake in one hand and the fireworks made by the doctor in the other, he rushed towards the destination where Robin lived. Advertisement before long,
Hayden relied on the strange memory reference in his mind to find exactly where Robin lived.
The newspaper on the box placed against the wall on the side of the house also made him more certain that this was what he threw here before.
Hayden then put it under the window, listening to the movement inside. There were several different voices in his ears, like the sharp voice of Aunt Robin before. But he did not recognize that Robin's voice was mixed in. Robin probably went back to his room. Thinking about Hayden, he thought of the vague impression that Robin's room seemed to have a small round window.
Hayden, who was carrying things, then walked to the back of the house and looked up. Under the moonlight, you can see that there is a small round window arched out of the upper part of the structure between the floors. M's brain hurts. After Hayden placed everything he was carrying on the ground, he stared at the small window and couldn't figure out his mind. Looking around, wanting to see if there is any stepping thing that can be used, I immediately thought of the wooden box on the side. Fortunately, only 2 of the wooden boxes are empty.
Hayden quickly moved the boxes to a position directly opposite the round window, overlapping them.
Knowing his current height, he held a small branch in his hand and stepped on the wooden box. Every time he jumped the small branch, he gently banged on the small round window, making a movement that only Robin could hear. It would be great if a little Gia came to pad his feet. Hayden, who had been staring at the movement of the round window, stopped for a while, couldn't help thinking in his heart.
At this time, the round window on the head was opened, and it was Robin who looked up and poked out. Perverted. What are you doing here? Robin, lying on the window, pressed his voice and whispered to Hayden below. Robin, hurry down, I'll take you to see a big baby. Noting Robin's appearance, Hayden said quickly, it's been a while since returning home. Robin's previous emotions have also calmed down a bit, and what will call him as her only friend. Although Robin wondered why Hayden called her so late, she didn't ask much, and turned out the window after using her power. Hayden carried things and walked ahead and opened the way. Robin silently followed behind him. Both of them were silent and no one spoke. In this way, the two came to the place where Hayden slept last night, which is on the beach by the coast. Here, the cake I got from the doctor's, you just ran out just now and haven't had a bite. Hayden and Robin were sitting on the beach. He opened the wrapped cake and handed it to Robin. Thank you. Robin, who was still a little depressed, didn't say much that he took the cake. Advertisement, hey, the next percent and as the highlight, Robin. Hayden ate a big mouthful of cake before he smiled at Robin and said, then stood up and took out the fireworks. Immediately afterwards, Hayden ran to the sea, as close to the sea as possible while holding the fireworks without letting the tide wet the fireworks.
Robin, look good. Hayden yelled at Robin from a long distance, motioning her to look this way. Then the hand action took out the match prepared in advance from the pocket of his pants, and with a light stroke, the flame rose and lit the fuse of the fireworks. In the next second, the lead wire burns out. Robin, not far away, hadn't understood what Hayden was going to show him, when he heard a tweet. A sound piercing the night sky sounded, and then paused for a moment. Boom. The first fireworks exploded over Hayden, and exploded over the peaceful O'Hare Island. Then, in Robin's sight, it was the bright and dazzling scene, and immediately colorful sparks rushed to the surroundings and turned into stars in the sky. Followed by the second round, the third round. F*K. Hayden's cry was covered up. Just a few steps away from the deafening sound, he was stunned by the power of the fireworks for the first time. I immediately thought of the smelly old man in his mind, and he didn't say that he was so powerful. Look at the size of this thing, it shouldn't be so fierce. After regaining his senses, he hurriedly climbed and ran away from the fireworks on the beach, and ran back to where Robin was in an embarrassment. At this moment, Hayden, who came back embarrassedly, and Robin sitting quietly on the beach looked at each other for a second. Ha 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 ha. Robin, who was still dull just now, suddenly burst into laughter, and Hayden was so frightened that she couldn't help laughing. Hayden looked at Robin grimly. You actually laughed out. I almost confessed where I was just now. His eyebrows rose suddenly. Ha 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 ha, sorry, next time I won't laugh. Robin, who was holding the cake, almost fell to the floor after he hadn't eaten a bite. Humph. Looking at Robin, Hayden was speechless, and sat down beside her, slurping his head and eating cake. Thank you, Hayden.
Chapter 6 Giant and Dwarf Bean. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement time came to the third day, that is, the third day when Hayden crossed into the pirate world. It also came to a bland noon of the day. After celebrating Robin last night, Hayden felt as if his relationship with Robin seemed to be closer. The weather is still an ordinary island climate, with white clouds floating in the blue sky. Hayden practiced a series of training exercises such as hacking, push-ups, sit-ups, etc. To be honest, he didn't think there was much to these actions, but felt mechanical and boring, and physical exercises could not be done quickly in a day or two, and there was no intuitive feeling in a short period of time. Tired is not only his body, but also his soul. So at noon he planned to take it for a short nap, to combine work and rest. After Hayden had eaten the lunch Robin brought, he collapsed on the hammock that was brought back with lunch. He tied the hammock between the two big trees on the edge of the coastal hills not far from the beach. A slight sea breeze blew in from the gap and brushed his body, so uncomfortable. The only pity is that there seems to be no sign of a big sun today. Asada was held in his arms, and his mask was placed under the tree that held the hammock. Lying down, Hayden looked at the tide not far away, rising up noisily, and then retreating like frustrated. There were still 2 or 3 seagulls in the air screaming.
His eyes couldn't help but lost his spirit, thinking of the giant lieutenant who will appear next in the plot. Although he has long remembered the name, the giant lieutenant will be both he and Robin who escaped from the island. Only chance. There is no sign of showing up yet. Just wait for today. If the person does not show up tomorrow, you must figure out a solution yourself as soon as possible.
Now in a real world, if the plot changes unexpectedly, you must act as soon as possible. Hayden repeatedly thought and emphasized in his heart, and gradually the sleepiness after the meal caught up with him. Advertisement. Wake up, perverted. Hayden, who was taking a nap, opened his eyes in a daze. Pervert, get up and follow me. Robin, who had separated after going to town together in the morning, found his place, and said with a little hand shaking in front of him. It seems that Robin was already certified by an archaeologist at this time. Reading too many books and knowing too many things, so it seems that nothing can cause her a little big mood swing. The tone of this meeting is still the same as usual. What? After a nap, Hayden's muscles ached a little, and his mind was not fully awake when he woke up. He staggered out of the hammock, and put the light in his arms next to the mask. Get up! Robin didn't care about that much, and after calling Hayden, he stepped out and went to the beach. Hayden had to stand up quickly, shook his head vigorously, and ran out after chasing him. Then, he saw Robin on the beach not far ahead, and a large group of unknown creatures appeared there. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Slightly closer to see, to be precise, it is a giant. This manga evolved into a characteristic race in the world, a race with overwhelmingly huge individuals, and generally has a lifespan of 3 times that of humans. The clothes, the skin, the hair on the head, the whole appearance was horribly. Lying on the beach, letting the tide rise and fall under him, 4 or 5 seabirds stood on his body and stopped. Hayden was also standing beside Robin at this time, watching the giant who appeared to be in a coma at close range. Just by watching from a distance, you can clearly feel the true literal meaning of giant. When he came closer, Hayden boldly approached the giant's finger and gestured with his body. Well, he has determined his size. He is someone he can't afford now. Advertisement. The body of his carrot head is not as thick as that of a finger. Hayden was amazed at the magic of this world, and at the same time he was happy in his heart. The arrival of the giants told him the progress of the plot, and now there is no need to think about the killing order. As long as you clarify the matter first, let this giant man made a raft, even if you meet sea kings and the like at sea. There is no problem with this giant tribe's original Navy admiral. There are just a few sea kings from the West China Sea, aren't they just stinky fish and shrimps? Joke. Suddenly, the birds stopped on the giant's body, seemed to perceive something flying away, and then the giant's body moved abruptly. There was a strange cry in his mouth, and the action shook up the heavy dust, covering his figure. The movement also scared Hayden instinctively to protect Robin behind him and quickly retreated. Wow. The giant roared at Hayden and Robin from his hoarse throat. With such a strong aura, it blew away the dust floating in front of him, and the clothes of the two of them were scraped back and clung to their bodies. Hayden was speechless. The tone was so loud that Hayden panicked and immediately covered his nose with his right hand, and also covered Robin's nose with his left hand by the way. The giant wanted to scare them both. Hayden was the kind of giant who knew in advance that this was a good guy, so he didn't react. And Robin is. Robin's as it is. The giant stared at the two small dots in front of him with his eyes larger than a lantern, and the two small dots stared back, and the atmosphere fell into silence for a while. Water, I want water. The eldest of the three frustrated first, and he raised his head and leaned back on the beach. Then, after Robin took the giant to drink water. It was the process of communication between Robin and this former lieutenant admiral named Hagaval D. Soro. Advertisement Hayden, who knew the plot, didn't join in the fun. Everyone in the plot knew it, and it was useless to know the others now. So he found a place to sit cross-legged next to Soro and Robin, flattened the shallow dab on his lap and started Blade Zen. Blade Zen refers to the god of death placing the Zhanpakudao on his lap to meditate and enter his inner world to communicate with the Zhanpakudao. Although it's just a shallow beating right now, there is always a process to turn her into a Zhanpakudao. Speaking of it, there is no daily licking of light to Tommy today, so I will lick it after meditation is over. Time flew quickly, and soon came the evening of twilight. Robin, who had an appointment with Salah and Hayden to meet here tomorrow, went home first, leaving Soro and Hayden with no place to live here. However, tonight is accompanied by Soro, a deterrent giant. Hayden said, "Who would dare to mess with me?" He was asleep last night and he was suddenly attacked by something small. There was nothing wrong with his life, but he was very scared. Judging from Robin's frequent shuttles in this area, Hayden knew that there should be no large wild animals nearby. But if you let him sleep a few more nights, he stopped thinking about this. Hayden felt that he should raise a business deal with Soro. It was difficult for him to speak with Robin before. Then Hayden told Soro the name of the island, told him whose daughter Robin was, and asked him to take him and Robin to flee the island tomorrow. Hayden only selected the important points and told Soro as to how to explain how a little kid knows these. He didn't explain, and he couldn't explain it either. Salah naturally didn't believe how such a coincidence could happen for the first time, but seeing Hayden's expression, he also muttered to himself. Paying attention to Soro's expression, Hayden was not too surprised, and finally told Soro to ask him to ask Robin himself after Robin came tomorrow. The two people with their own minds did not say a word, and fell asleep one after another. Chapter 7 As stable as an old dog? Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement The next day the giant came to this island, in the morning. At this time, Hayden, Robin, and Soro changed their places to stay. There is not much shelter near the beach, which is not conducive to the hiding of the real giants like Soro, so they changed to a remote shore with trees and hills. Without waiting, Soro placed Robin on a hill about the same height as he sat down, staring at her and asking about one thing that had bothered him since last night. "Ah, what? Your mother's name is really Olvia." Robin, who was sitting on the hill with his knees, was not very emotional, and told Soro with a cold expression about her mother. However, she didn't expect that this incident actually seemed to scare Soro. Immediately, Soro's pupils dilated instantly, and cold sweat oozing from his forehead could not help, and his expression panicked. "Puff," said. Sauluo's body fell backwards like a dead machine, shaking the ground for a while. Immediately his brain was working quickly. Robin is Olvia's daughter. This island is O'Hara. Navy ships are coming here. What Hayden Imp said is all right. Suddenly, Soro stood up in a spirited spirit. "Hayden kid." He looked at Hayden, who wanted to say something but didn't know what to say. Hayden was looking for an open space next to him and continued to practice hacking, paying full attention. Advertisement I asked Soro to teach him the correct method before. Although Soro does not seem to be a lieutenant admiral who specializes in swordsmanship, he still knows the general appearance after he hasn't practiced. The effect he feels is indeed blinder than a few days ago. The practice is much better. Compared to Soro's panic, Hayden would be as stable as an old dog. After all, it was useless for him to be anxious at this time. He still had to wait for Soro to build a raft before he could escape from the island, and the plot seemed to take a few days to happen. For himself, he has now solved the primary survival crisis and found a strong backing. Although it wasn't Carp, Admiral, or the like, he said it was okay. That's it. It's over. How could this happen? How could this happen? I actually drifted to O'Hara. Soro, who still felt unbelievable, stood up and hugged his head and yelled. The giant's power cannot be easily ignored, and the movement interrupted Hayden in practice. Robin, who was sitting on a high place, was also unclear, looking at Salah with a confused expression on his face. Suddenly, Soro stopped, and at this moment he was sweating and looked at Robin with a panic expression. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Robin, you may be surprised, but you have to listen to what I said. Now the Navy ships are coming to O'Hara to reduce the scholars on this island. After listening to this, Robin naturally didn't believe it, but he couldn't help standing up and shouting at Solo. You are a lie. It's real, Robin. When did I lie to you? Now you go back to town and see what's wrong. Maybe your mother is back too. Robin, who was very unbelieving in his mind, quickly called Soro to let her go. Immediately afterwards, she ran towards the town regardless of her concern. Advertisement Soro did not follow up because of his own reasons, but Hayden felt that it was unnecessary to follow up now, and there was nothing wrong with it anyway. Afterwards, Hayden asked Soro to lift him up to the hill where Robin was sitting just now, and began today's meditation. Next, Hayden, who closed his eyes and thought about it, couldn't bear it anymore, and his butt and legs were sore. Next to Soro has been performing Lu Jishen's Drooping Willows, and after seeing Hayden for the first time, he still felt quite new and amazing. Of course, he knew that Soro did this to build a raft. However, after Soro demonstrated more than a dozen times, this particularly big movement was really noisy. Wait. After opening his eyes, he just wanted to ask Soro to put him down, but the gaze from the corner of Hayden's eyes noticed something different. I don't know how far away a wooden pole appeared on the sea horizon, followed by a pure white sail with a seagull pictured on it. He knows the meaning of the pattern very well, and the logo means the Navy. This is one of the 3 major forces on the Great Sea Route in the name of absolute justice to maintain law and order in the oceans of the world, and it is also the world's largest military organization. It is precisely the only thing Hayden wants to see most now. The number of naval warships in his field of vision is slowly increasing. From the perspective of his fear, it seems that the entire naval fleet has been dispatched, and the number of warships is not exhausted. Hey, Soro, look over there. Feeling terrible, Hayden hurriedly yelled to Soro, who was still working. Even if he didn't need to tell him, trembling instinctively now, he knew what was unexpected with the appearance of naval ships. Unexpected deviations occurred in the plot, and today is likely to be the execution day of the Devil Killing Order. Advertisement Salah clearly heard Hayden's yelling, and he didn't understand what Hayden was doing, who urged him to build a raft from time to time last night. Then he turned his head to look in the direction of Hayden, and noticed Hayden's gesture towards the sea. Then, the Navy ship came into his eyes. He used to own a warship that he knew very well, but now he shunned it. Sad, damn. Why did the Navy come so soon? Soro couldn't believe it, holding his head. Hayden, who had the same headache, was shocked at this moment, suddenly thinking of Robin in his mind. Robin ran to town first. Now that the naval ships used to execute the demon killing order have arrived, the ships used to secure the scholars' world government should have arrived long ago. My sow. Did you land on shore from other places? Now I don't know how long it was delayed. In a blink of an eye, Hayden thought about these things in his mind, and his head was about to grow bigger. He can only act immediately. Hurry up, Soro. Robin is still in town, Hayden urged Soro anxiously with a nervous look. Hayden, I'll be back here when I find Robin, and I'll be waiting for you here. Salah said as he put Hayden down. His expression is similar to Hayden at this time. He could only continue to build the raft before it was built, otherwise the 3 of them would not be able to escape the island. Yeah. Hayden nodded with a solemn expression. There should be some time now. Without further clarification, he carried a shallow dab on his back, put on a monkey mask, and started rushing towards the central area of O'Hara Island. Time passed by every minute, and there was still some distance from the coast to the center of the island. Chapter 8 The Slaughter Order is launched. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Haiyuan Calendar 1502, 2 years after the opening of the Great Pirate Era. O'Hara Island, a famous archaeological sacred site in the West China Sea. We must catch up. A child wearing a strange monkey mask and a stick behind his back is swimming against the current among the fleeing crowd. Hayden, who has only a child's body, can't run much faster. In the time estimation in his own mind, he felt that he had been running for a long time. Then he saw the edge of the town on the island, and then he saw all the villagers who lived in the town, all of them carrying bags, of different sizes. The villagers are facing the same direction, that is, behind him, the place to walk out of the town. The expressions on everyone's faces were full of panic, as if they knew that something terrible would happen next. Obviously, it is not necessary for Hayden to think carefully, he also understands what this abnormal phenomenon means. F*K. The uninterrupted sprint made his body work almost beyond the load, and he felt as if his lungs were burning non-stop. However, Hayden didn't have the thought of stopping and resting in his mind, and he even wanted to continue to push his body to explode beyond the limit. He interspersed among the gaps in the crowd and continued to move towards the tree of all-knowing. Stepping on the stone brick streets in the town, weaving through the town, the scenery of buildings on both sides of which are similar and slightly different constantly scraped behind Hayden, and the streets in this section of town seemed to be endless. Boom! Advertisement suddenly, staring at Hayden at the farthest point in front, he heard a different voice in his ears. Different from the noisy noise made by the villagers who fled in the town at this moment, it is a. Thinking of a terrible thing, Hayden couldn't help but raised his head and looked up in front of him. A shelling fire from a ship of the world government on the coast hit the tree of all-knowing, and a thick black smoke mixed with a little firelight suddenly rose. "I'm Sao." Hayden immediately scolded when he noticed. "Is it too late?" At this moment, he felt like playing a movie in his heart, flashing scenes of memories of crossing here. The awkward meeting when I first met Robin, Robin's Dragonclaw. Encourage Robin to use her ability to go to the villagers' homes to get things for herself. Looks handsome in front of Robin. Eating cake with Robin under the stars and watching the fireworks. In just a few days, he still doesn't want to end. Since there has been a slight deviation in the plot, it is also possible that Robin is the only surviving O'Hara incident. There has also been a slight deviation in the plot. If not, read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. After thinking a lot, Hayden stopped thinking because his destination had arrived. Not far in front of the destination all-knowledge tree, a large number of people gathered in the open space. Hayden had never stopped running here. After stopping, his upper body was soaked with sweat, and his heart was beating non-stop under vigorous exercise. With the mask still on, he couldn't bear it, uncovered the mask and moved it on his head, and then he breathed in the fresh air. Then Hayden, who was hiding behind the wall not far from the crowd, leaned out to observe the next side. In his sight, he could see that it was the group of scholars he had seen before that was surrounded by him, and Robin was kneeling beside Dr. Kloba, who was lying on the ground. Hayden wasn't sure if he saw it right. Advertisement. Surrounding them are the world government personnel wearing neatly uniformed suits, each holding a standard spear in his hand at the restless scholars. At a glance, the other three saw the heads of the surrounding people standing at the forefront of the crowd, and there seemed to be someone lying in front of them. Standing in the middle of the three people wearing striped coats is obviously the CP9 head Spandane, who was the CP9 head Spandane in the original Judicial Island incident. They were all two people who had gone straight. Spandane was doing something with something in his hand. As for the left and right thugs behind him, Hayden thinks he should be a member of CP9 at this time. Probably thinking about the strength of both sides, Hayden, hiding behind the wall, did not dare to go out. As long as you pull the trigger at the muzzle of the black hole at will, bang, after a simple shot, you will die immediately, and you don't have to think about the two CP9s standing there leisurely. As long as I go out, my destiny will be in the hands of others. Hayden, who was shaking uncontrollably, pressed his body against the wall, as if an iron ball weighing several tons was tied to his ankle with a chain. What I thought in my heart was that I had to go out, but what I thought about my feet was another matter. At this moment, the flames of the tree of omniscience in front gradually spread because of the fire left by the shelling, covering a large area. The scholars surrounded by them noticed this and rioted in a flash, and rushed to the tree of all-knowing like a desperate gunpoint at them. Spanda didn't care about their actions at this time. He had just launched the demon slaying order, and he would confess to this island if he didn't retreat. Immediately he gave an instruction to retreat, and asked the two men behind him to take the man lying in front of him. Robin seemed to realize something, stood up, and asked the woman who was taken away, "Are you my mother?" The three CP9s stopped curiously after hearing this. "Huh? That bastard is your kid?" "No, I think you confessed to the wrong person," said the woman who was carried with her head lowered and said lightly. There was a strong premonition in Robin's heart, tears and nasal mucus couldn't help but flow out. "I'm Robin. Don't you know me when I grow up? I've been waiting for you to come back." Advertisement: I studied very hard and finally became an archaeologist. I can also read the text of history. All of a sudden, Robin was restrained by Hayden's restraint. Hayden, who had been looking here, didn't understand what Robin was going to say at first, until Robin's voice grew louder and his expression became more excited. He just remembered how Robin was rewarded only after he was known to be able to read the text of history. Hayden broke free of the chains that trapped him and rushed towards Robin, trying to activate his ability to prevent Robin from saying that, but it was too late, and he only ran a few steps.
That kid. Robin's information made Spandane's face go dark immediately. Before he had waited for what he wanted to do, in an instant, the demon-killing order launched in the name of justice enveloped the entire O'Hara. Boom, boom, boom. Explosions occurred in various places on the island one after another. The undifferentiated firepower coverage from 10 top naval warships also shocked Spandane. At exactly this time, a cannonball landed at a distance from Spandane, and he was so frightened that he decided to run quickly, followed by a large group of his men. This group of archaeologists who were sentenced to death remained here to fend for themselves. He believes that no one can survive the sanctions imposed by the decree. On the other side, Hayden didn't stop after he used the binding road, and he had already rushed to the clearing. Because he untied the way in the middle, Robin was able to hug her mother, whom she hadn't seen in years. The turbulent artillery fire continued to explode in the ears, and the entire island was under unbearable attacks. Thick smoke rose from everywhere on the island, and hot flames were all around it, as if surrounded by a circle. And now Hayden was standing next to Dr. Kloba. Looking at this place is not the scene that would appear in his life before crossing, just like the scene of hell on earth. Hayden's brain was blank. Chapter 9 Big Crisis, Big Decision. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. In front of the scorching tree of omniscience, the surrounding temperature has already warmed up quietly, scorching everyone's mind and body. The artillery shells fired by the naval warships far off the sea produced continuous rumbling noises. At this time, only a group of archaeologists who were studying here remained here, besides that were Hayden, Robin, and her mother Albia. Hayden. Robin, who was still holding his mother just now, let go of his hands, and turned around and yelled at the sluggish Hayden. This sound immediately awakened Hayden, who had lost his soul. Immediately afterwards, like a raging tide, all his senses of sight, hearing, and smell returned to his body. He is now in the world of pirates, on O'Hara Island, which is under the slaughter of magic, in front of the Tree of All Knowledge, staying with Robin and other characters who were only fantasy before. In an instant, Hayden's mind went through many circles. The most important thing at the moment is to quickly take Robin to the coast to find Sorrow, so that the two of them have a chance of surviving from this demon-killing order. I'm Sal. Thinking of Hayden's secret curse, he hurried to the place where Robin and her mother were. As for Dr. Kloba next to him, Hayden couldn't tell from the gunshot wounds whether there was any rescue, but he could tell from Dr. Kloba's face that the doctor's time was running out. These archaeologists are a group of people who can understand the text of history. If you want to know the blank 100-year history, someone must be able to understand it. Furthermore, if you want to understand the historical text of the 4 red road signs, and know the last island, the end of the Great Route Luvalu, it is natural that someone can understand what is written on the stone. It's just that the people who can understand the text of history are basically here. But, now Hayden, who is only a child, is unable to lend a hand, he can only try to protect himself. Hello, you are Robin's friend. Thank you for being by Robin's side. Robin's mother is approximately equal to Hayden's mother-in-law. The young Alvia looked at the strange little boy in front of him with a clean-looking face and a monkey mask on his head. She said in a very gentle tone, "If you can still find Robin at this juncture, then this little boy must be very good to Robin," she thought. Alvia's calm and gentle words seemed to soothe some of the panic in Hayden's heart at this moment. Good aunt. For the rest, Hayden didn't know what to say, because he knew what the ending of Robin's mother would be. Advertisement. He has no ability to change the ending. It seems that a golden finger has come to the world of pirates, but when faced with such a situation without sufficient strength, there is nothing he can do. Hayden looked at Robin with tears on his face in front of him, and Robin's mother who was half kneeling on the grass with scars on his face. He didn't have time to let Robin and her mother feel the joy of reunion after a long time. They should go to sorrow. The surviving Dr. Kloba behind did the same. He raised his spirit and shouted at Alvia, "No mother-in-law. Run with two little ghosts. Find a way to get on the refuge ship and escape from the island." Suddenly, there seemed to be a louder sound than the movement of a cannonball. Boom, boom, boom. At this time, Sorrow found them. "Robin, Hayden, I finally found you." Sorrow, who had not rested for a few days from his body injury, obviously couldn't withstand the long distance running now, he said with his hands on his knees, a little breathless. Sorrow, Robin, Alvia, and all shouted in unison. "I'm Sal, it's okay," Hayden whispered to himself, standing next to him. At least he wouldn't die by the shelling with Sorrow. Alvia was surprised. "Sorrow, why are you on this island? This is really doomed." Alvia, "Can't say more. Come up and go together." The sharp decline in the situation made Sorrow dare not delay for a second. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Alvia seemed to have her own business to do, and said, "Robin entrusted it to you. And so is this little boy." Looking up at Sorrow, her expression revealed a certain kind of determination. "Ah, no, mother. Why don't you go with us?" Hearing this, Robin's emotions that had calmed down just now became agitated again and looked at his mother. "I have something to do here, let's go." After this, Alviato gave Robin a paragraph, and then asked Sorrow to leave here quickly with Robin and Hayden. Robin cried into tears in Sorrow's hands at this time. The mother who hadn't seen him for many years reunited before they were separated, and this parting will be forever. In the process of Hayden who was also in Saluo's palm, there was no word in the process. This kind of moment needs Robin and she to accept it alone, and everyone else seems to be superfluous at this time. Feeling coldly. Advertisement. While Salo took Hayden and Robin to flee together, a shell fired from a naval warship struck Salo and towards him, the former lieutenant general of the Navy. Although Sorrow saw the trajectory of the cannonball, he couldn't avoid it and hit him in the face accurately. A second before the explosion, Sorrow put his hands together, and Hayden and Robin were plunged into darkness. After feeling a violent shock stop, Sorrow opened his hands. Hayden saw a lot of blood on Sorrow's face, and he couldn't tell where the wound was. Sorrow's expression was also different from the past. He felt a strong sense of oppression. "Sorry Robin, I frightened you, wait a minute." After speaking, Saluo put Hayden and Robin on the ground, and ran towards the warship just off the coast. The Navy on the warship watched their familiar Lieutenant Admiral walking towards them, and everyone had a bad premonition. When Sorrow walked to the side of the warship, "I don't care about justice or unjust, now I want to protect my friends." Sorrow said so, and Hayden saw it. The giant standing on the coast raised the warship in the sea with both hands. Pizza Euro himself didn't know how many times the size of the warship was lifted by him. At the very least, it can accommodate hundreds of people to live and fight, and there are also some prison cells. There are many strange things on the sea. Not only prisoners of ordinary size, but also prisoners of special size, plus weapons and equipment, ammunition reserves, etc. The weight of a warship is unimaginable. Is this the strength of the Lieutenant Admiral of the Navy headquarters? Hayden was staring at him at the back. Then, before Hayden could come back to his senses, Sorrow raised the warship and smashed it on the sea as if it were a model of a warship. In an instant, the huge warship spread out and shattered on the sea. However, one warship was smashed, and there were other warships, and they all came toward this side at this time. In a crisis situation, Soro blocked the attack for the two of them and told them to hurry to the refuge ship. It's a pity that Spandane also spotted Robin behind Soro and a kid wearing a monkey mask next to him. Immediately use the phone worm to inform the personnel on the refuge ship. You are not allowed to let that little girl and that little devil aboard the ship, no matter how young. That little girl is an archaeologist. Ice cube, 2 thorn spears. Advertisement. Suddenly, the Admiral of the Navy, code-named Blue Pheasant, and the current Lieutenant Admiral Kuzan, appeared behind Soro. The spear formed by the ice glided past Soro. At this moment, Hayden, Robin, Soro and the Green Pheasant were standing on a line, standing on the shore. Just when the Green Pheasant was about to speak, the refuge ship not far from the shore exploded in an instant. The huge momentum made the 4 of them turn their heads at the same time to face the direction of the explosion. The bombardment is the bombardment of warships, it is Sarkarsky's ship. Lieutenant General Kuzan quickly understood what was going on. That bastard. Hayden didn't know what to think at the moment, only to notice that Soro continued to talk with the pheasant. The frozen fruit ability in the original manga, the Admiral of the Admiral. In the War on the Top, the Ice Age is so handsome. But, now standing on the opposite side of him, becoming his enemy. The indescribable deterrence that this real face exudes made Hayden uncomfortable. Immediately afterwards, he noticed Saluo's lower body, which was gradually frozen by the ice, shining shiny. Soro only had time to turn around to face both Hayden and Robin. Hayden, run quickly with Robin. Use the raft you built before and quickly escape from the island. Slowly, the frozen lower body extended to his chest a little bit. I can't do it anymore. You two should take good care of each other. Robin, remember, just laugh like this when you are in pain, hehehehe. Soro walked away with a smile on his face, and finally turned into an ice sculpture. Robin, run. Remember where we stayed in the morning, Soro's raft should be there. Hayden looked at Soro's eyes, who had already left before him, and silently told Robin. He didn't know if the next plot development would be the same as in the comics. In the end, the Green Pheasant would let Robin send her out of the island. However, Hayden felt that it didn't seem to matter anymore. As long as he blocks the Green Pheasant with his mouth here, see if the Green Pheasant will see me as a kid. Then let Robin run to the raft. Let us decide our own destiny. Chapter 10 Awakening. My master is as you wish. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Towards the end of the O'Hara incident, Soro turned into a giant ice sculpture like a trigger, shattered in front of Hayden and Robin, and turned into countless ice crystals floating in front of them. Under the radiance of the burning forest fire on the side, the reflected ice crystals looked so gorgeous. What? Hearing Hayden's words, Robin reacted even more excitedly. Hayden, won't you go with me? She asked immediately. Doctors, they have Mother and Soro. One after another, they left her one after another, and Robin's heart was full of emotions that could not be expressed in words. And now, the last person to stay with her, her companion, will also leave her. With a jerk, her brain stopped thinking. Run. Hayden watched the Green Pheasant, who was not far away from them, walked over, and hurriedly said, "Leave me alone, I'm here to block him." He didn't know what would happen if he waited for the Blue Pheasant to get closer, but he didn't care about that much, so he pushed Robin back hard so that he could delay some time by himself. Robin, who was unable to think, was passively pushed by Hayden, following Hayden's orders mechanically in his mind. Unbearable tears and nasal mucus had already covered her cheeks, crying and ran towards the raft. So far, only 2 people who came to Hayden and the Green Pheasant stood here nearby. Advertisement. Robin. You must live. Hayden looked at Robin's departure, although he felt very uncomfortable, but if he could buy Robin a little time, he felt it was worth it. Thinking of this, Hayden turned back to look at the Green Pheasant in front of him. This would not be blocked by anything, and Hayden could thoroughly see the appearance of the Green Pheasant. He wears navy accessories all over his body, a turban on his exploding head, and a pair of round sunglasses on his face, giving him the feeling of 2 5-boy-specific glasses. The whole body of the Green Pheasant exudes a forcing chill, and in the surrounding firelight environment, Hayden on the opposite side seems to be able to feel the temperature drop. Hayden no longer cared about the mask on his head at this time. He took it off, and then he held the shallow beater behind him in his hands with both hands, and looked straight ahead at the blue pheasant, which was beyond the normal shape. Okay. To be honest, facing a child now, the green pheasant is a bit big, and he doesn't know what to do with this child. And now, this little kid actually still had the courage to face him and sacrificed himself for his companions, a powerful kid. The green pheasant stopped watching Hayden's posture. Now that he has made a fighting stance, he should know what the next result will be. Therefore, in order to show respect for this little devil's determination, the green pheasant did not intend to skip Hayden. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. After Hayden on this side watched the green pheasant stop, he started thinking quickly. Since obtaining the Zhanpakudao, he can feel an indescribable energy in his body, and he also understands that it is his spiritual power. And every minute and every second is slowly increasing, and now he estimates that he should be able to use the Tao once again, after which there will be no means. As for the swordsmanship that I have just practiced for a few days, this is used to deal with the green pheasant. How many slashes and slashes, it is not close to the body of the green pheasant. Damn it, this 5 Zhanpaku. Although Hayden thought quickly, they were all useless. Facing the strength that could crush him, he was desperate. Advertisement. At this moment, he had an unexplainable emotion exploded. I have always been the dispensable person. It makes no difference at all without me. It can even be said that it would be better without me. I don't know why I came to this world. Maybe I will stay here and it won't make any difference. But I really want to do something. For Robin, and for myself. Hayden watched the green pheasant in front of him and read this paragraph silently, making his own choice. He wants to leave his own traces in this world. Immediately after speaking, he seemed to feel his body lightened a bit. Hey, Hayden, who was in a fighting posture toward the green pheasant, then shouted, "You should be a lieutenant admiral now. Is it what the self-proclaimed just party should do to kill the children and clean up the civilians? Sweeping the dead ashes just now," laughed. Hayden's voice was enough for him to hear clearly. This kid. The green pheasant frowned and looked at Hayden, who was indistinguishable from an ordinary boy. The so-called justice will also change according to the position, then. When the green pheasant turned his head and looked at the place where the refuge ship was before, he felt a sense of fire, and then said, "But, as for the other things, that there is no way. Besides, the scholars on the island have indeed broken the law. I noticed that the child in front of me seemed to know a lot of things, and he probably said a lot. There are also young green pheasants who seem to obey certain laws in their hearts. However, as for what he really thought in his heart, no one would know." "Your mouth is pretty good," Hayden said. Advertisement. Mouth. The green pheasant calmly focused on the strange words. Faced with people who don't know where their strength is higher than themselves, it is useless to talk about it. Looking at the quiet green pheasant in front, the fear in Hayden's heart was also slowly magnified. This is one of the 3 major generals of the Navy afterwards, and is known as the highest combat power of the Navy headquarters and the world government. Even if it was more than 20 years ago, the strength of a green pheasant who was not a general is unimaginable. At this time, he turned into a stinky fish and a rotten shrimp. Immediately afterwards, Hayden, who had been staring at the green pheasant, noticed that frost had formed on his right wrist, and his hand exuded a dangerous aura. He knew exactly what the green pheasant could do. Hayden was so frightened that he could not control his hands and shuddered. Asphalt also trembled, not to mention using tricks. "I'm Sao. Stop for me. No matter what," he shouted, ridiculously trying to suppress the rising emotions. The green pheasant saw that Hayden was silent next, and it seemed that he didn't intend to say anything, so he approached Hayden step by step. At the same time, the actions of the green pheasant made Hayden feel irritable. "My Zhanpei knife, if you don't come out, your master will take a dog." Since the Zhanpakudao was built from a shallow dagger that was infused with its own soul, then this shallow dagger must now have a part of its own soul. "Tell my name. I will recognize you as the master in the future, okay?" Now to survive, Hayden said everything. "Okay, my master, in that case, it's as you wish." Chapter 11 Absolutely Zero. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. An unfamiliar voice from his own mind sounded, pleasing to the ear and making Hayden an uncontrollable impulse. Boom. In the next second, Hayden seemed to be drawn into the darkness. When I opened my eyes, what I saw was an unfamiliar environment. The sky is not visible above, the light is a pure black background. Immediately afterwards, the silver-clad plane building appeared before his eyes. Staring at the front, it is thousands of miles of ice, silver peaks surrounded, a piece of Changyu world. It freezes the entire area where Hayden is now. Looking at the ice walls on the left and right where the end is not visible, you can see that behind the wall is like a villa. It's just that the whole building is made of silver white pure ice. Hayden was outside the gate of the villa at this time. The breath exhaled from the nose was clearly visible, but Hayden didn't seem to feel the slightest cold yet, as if he had no sense. Hayden, wearing thin clothes, was in this icy world, as if it were still summer. In an unfamiliar environment, Hayden did not panic. Recalling in his mind that someone had shouted in his inner world not long ago, if there were no accidents, then the voice must have been his own Zhanpaku. Is it the ice Zhanpaku knife? I awakened myself. It's useless to think about it, so I hurried in to figure it out. Guessing that Hayden stopped the thoughts in his head, he pushed the door and walked in. When I walked in, it seemed that this villa was a Japanese-style courtyard villa, and Hayden thought to himself in his heart. The first time he came in, he didn't see anyone there, and Hayden, who was a little puzzled, couldn't help walking around from the right side of the house. Although this is his inner world, he has the idea of wanting to avoid it inexplicably when he rushes into the room in an unfamiliar environment. The outer wall of the house looked amazing, but the inside was about the size of an ordinary Japanese courtyard villa. Hayden walked to the back of the house within a few steps. Immediately, Hayden, who was naturally going to look at the back of the house, saw the woman sitting still on the edge of the house. Hayden couldn't help but walked a few steps closer, standing in the courtyard facing the woman a few steps away, looking directly at the woman in front of him. Ice blue eyes, long lavender hair, wearing an ivory white long-sleeved kimono, long hair is also well-care kind of breath that strangers are not near. Sitting on the ice and snow, the surrounding cold also had no effect on this woman. Advertisement. The woman who seemed to be expressionless just now noticed Hayden in front of her, her mouth raised slightly. Then, with a smile on her face that seemed to melt snow and ice, her right hand hooked her finger towards Hayden, motioning him to come closer, but did not speak. Hayden, who was a little dumbfounded just now, still didn't know what Zhanpakudao he had awakened. Then Hayden approached the woman in front of him silently. Even though he came to his inner world, there is no way to solve the problem of height. Originally, the place where the woman was sitting was a bit high above the ground, plus her own height. Hayden, who was standing just now, hadn't felt anything yet, and he felt a little embarrassed when he got closer. He must look up. Puff. The woman obviously noticed a trace of embarrassment in the atmosphere, and couldn't help but chuckle. Hayden's face suddenly became dark. Damn, he didn't want to become a little dwarf. Well, my master. The woman leaned forward slightly, her left hand propped underneath, but her right hand was gently picked on Hayden's chin, like a strange eldest sister teasing Xiao Zhengtai. My master, you should know my name now. At this point, the woman smiled. Then he said, then I wish the master a prosperous Wuyun. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. After the words fell, Hayden plunged into darkness again before he could react. It seemed that after being touched by the woman, he received a huge message in his mind in an instant. At this point, in an instant, Hayden's perception returned to the real world. Back in the world of pirates, back to O'Hara. He was facing Lieutenant Admiral of the Navy Headquarters, Kuzan, code-named Green Pheasant, the frozen fruit ability. Ling Wu, Shu Baishui. Without any extra delay, Hayden awakened and liberated his Zhanpaku sword as soon as he returned. Immediately after the voice fell, he saw the change in front of him. The stick in his hand was like a broken ice cube, and the excess part fell to the ground, revealing a white knife. Advertisement. The blade, guard, handle, etc. have all become snow white, covered with strange patterns, and the chain at the end of the handle has also become a long white ribbon at this time. At the same time, due to the skyrocketing spiritual pressure, Hayden's body also tended to grow taller, and a pure white ore that went straight into the sky rose. The pupils had turned silvery white, and a stream of light flashed in his eyes. The temperature around him changed, and a cold zone suddenly appeared in the area covered by the fire. In the blink of an eye, Hayden's entire body changed suddenly, causing the blue pheasant to stop step by step. What happened to this kid? The blue pheasant, who couldn't help but frown and stared at Hayden, couldn't understand. In a short period of time, the very ordinary child just now felt completely different to him. And the imposing manner of this kid just now. Overlord look. No. Although it feels similar to the look of an overlord, it should not be right. With a keen perception, he also noticed that the ground under Hayden's feet had been frozen by something at this moment. The coldness of that color changes, and the green pheasant will never admit it wrong. Is this kid a capable person? Is my subordinate fruit? Or is it derived from other types of abilities? The fruit ability is driven by physical strength, and the momentum that was about to materialize just now. This kid shouldn't reach that level. This kid is really weird. The green pheasant that seemed to have been thinking about it for a long time was actually only a moment. At this time, Hayden, who was ready, spoke. The next move is a special move I can use now, so be careful. Hearing this, the green pheasant was not surprised. Judging by the kid's movements, he would definitely use a special move. It's just that he is a person with the ability to eat the fruits of the natural type, and he is not domineering, and the attributes of the attack are still the same. Although the aura that Hayden had exploded just now surprised him a bit, but now that he was basically invincible, he did not take Hayden to his heart. My ability is the ability to drop the temperature of my body below the freezing point, and everything I touch will freeze. Hayden silently began to approach the green pheasant. In the original Book of Reaper, the time limit of Kuchiki Rukia's absolute zero is 4 seconds, and a little more than 4 seconds will cause physical damage. As for Hayden's limit, he doesn't know, and doesn't care. Not a natural one. The green pheasant, who stood still and didn't intend to move, thought in his heart. Advertisement. This weird kid made him uncontrollably curious, and he planned to stand still and see what he could do. -18 degrees. Hayden's movements as he meditated forward became a little stiff. -50 degrees. His feet touched the ground to freeze the water inside, forming an ice shock. His movements have also become more slow. -273.15 degrees absolute zero. Hayden's movements have become like puppets at this moment. In the extreme state, Hayden Chang brought up the spirit and resorted to the combo he had anticipated in advance. The 9 of Bound Dao. In order to save time, he gave up singing. Suddenly, the unexpected trick stopped the green pheasant for just 1 second. However, 1 second was enough to make his final blow. One cut. All in all, Hayden, who had concentrated on all the Reiatsu at this moment, slammed a slash that he could not believe, like a paintbrush of God, drew a stroke of ice, and the land touched by the cross-cutting slash was already white. The raging forest fire borders the frozen thousands of miles. However, this trick also exhausted Hayden's last strength and fell into a coma. At this time, Hayden's body returned to its original appearance, and the Zhanpaku sword transformed into a normal knife. His body had been frozen stiff and there was no blood. Well, this kid really is. The green pheasant scratched his head and had a headache. At the last moment when the slash was about to touch the green pheasant's body, he used the shaving to avoid Hayden's slash. Even though Hayden swung the slash, he immediately sensed that Hayden's attack did not entangle domineering, which also meant that Hayden's attack would naturally have no effect at all. However, he still had an instinct to avoid in his heart that drove him to avoid the slash. At this time, he was standing behind Hayden, his right hand could not help being placed on the back of his head. Looking at the traces left by nature itself, he didn't know what he was thinking. Chapter 12 Marine. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. In 1502 of the Haiyuan calendar, not long after the O'Hara massacre in the West Sea, a fleet of 9 huge naval warships is equipped with 5 lieutenants, 10 major generals, and nearly 10,000 elite naval forces. This force that cannot be ignored and frightened sails in the windless zone. The blue sky and the sun are shining brightly. A few seagulls crossed the mast of the warship and flew freely, making a cheerful cry. On one of the warships of the fleet, in a ward. Well. Hayden opened his heavy eyes with difficulty, and an unfamiliar ceiling appeared in his sight. 3 consecutive question marks. Where is this? What am I doing before? Suddenly, Hayden's mind could not deal with the situation at the moment. And he also felt that his body seemed to be slightly different, not just the stiffness of the whole body at this time, but also strange changes seemed to have taken place. It seems that I was in the shower before, it should be like this, but. My sow. Why did I cross again? No, why should I say it again? The dumbfounded Hayden really didn't understand what was happening in front of him. He himself, a dignified 1-meter-8 man, turned into a child. Staring at his slender legs like a weak chicken, like a broken arm, Hayden was in a trance and couldn't believe it. He thought he was dreaming and woke up in the dream. Advertisement. He hurriedly turned off the bed and stepped on the wooden floor despite his physical unbearability. Then he looked around his current room and checked the situation. White sheets and quilts, a white Japanese sword leaning against the bed. There is a round porthole on the wooden wall on the left, and a set of tables and chairs are placed against the wall. The table is placed on the table that seems to be medically related. Hayden can read the small room at a glance, but he doesn't understand where he is now. The weird decoration style, the feeling of this ward, and the pungent smell in the air made him feel uncomfortable. Immediately he picked up the knife beside the bed, opened the door without thinking, and walked out. Suddenly, the light shining on him from the outside made his vision go dark, and he couldn't stop walking out with his hand in front of him. Within a few seconds, the blurred vision returned. Immediately afterwards, the scene before his eyes made him even more unimaginable. Hayden came out of the cabin, and he went outside. What caught his attention most was the endless blue sea in front of his sight. Now he was in a corridor blocked by a railing. He who was lying on the railing couldn't help but look down. People in white uniforms were scattered on the deck in 2s and 3s, and they seemed to have weapons in their hands. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi, and this deck is simply bigger to him. The whole ship, which is so big that it has no sides, seems to be made of wood. On both sides of the ship, there are also big black iron pipes in the capital of the ship, which seems to be some kind of naval gun. There are huge sails hanging overhead. Hayden didn't understand, and wondered if people would spend money to build such a big sailboat to go to sea these days. Ah! A strange voice rang in his ears. Hayden couldn't help turning to the direction of the voice and raised the stick in his hand. "You're awake," said a man in a white coat who emerged from the side at some unknown time. Huh. Hayden noticed that the man dressed as a doctor was a little confused. "Wait for me, I'll call Lieutenant General Kuzan." The man who said then left again. Advertisement. Kuzan. Lieutenant General. What is this strange name and title? Where am I? I'm Sao. Afterwards, Hayden's heart became even more daunting, and this strange phenomenon made him feel more and more anxious. After standing there for a while, an unbelievably tall man appeared in front of Hayden, and the man in the white coat was following him. "Boy, how's it going?" Hayden suspected that this man was at least 3 meters tall and asked. The pressure of unspeakable aura caused Hayden to move his throat. I'm okay, probably. He really didn't understand what was going on in front of him while he was talking eloquently. "That's good. Ask you a question, kid, do you want to join the Navy?" The green pheasant who got Hayden's answer immediately asked again that the power that this kid had exploded in O'Hara, coupled with his revealed heart, made him have an inexplicable idea to take Hai to the ship. "Hi. Jun." Hayden didn't understand. Suddenly, "Start the sail." A command-like voice rang from below. Immediately after, Hayden heard another movement from below, as well as from above. Subsequently, the canvas on the mast of the warship was pulled apart one by one, and the sail was put away just now because it was sailing in a windless zone. And now, all the fleets that had sailed out of the windless zone had pulled apart their canvases. In the next second, the sign that appeared in front of him interrupted Hayden's next words. His eyes were round and his mouth was wide open. The blue pattern painted on the sail resembles a seagull holding a scale, and several letters marine are written under the pattern. The mark of the Navy, the ship under your feet, the words Lieutenant General Kuzan, this man's peculiar height, a somewhat familiar face. Now, he understood immediately. The weird feelings that I noticed since waking up, like layers of fog, were now pushed away by him. Advertisement. He actually crossed into the world of comic One Piece. After Hayden and the green pheasant talked casually, they went back to the ward on the excuse of being uncomfortable. Although he was still a little excited while stunned, he had to go back and check that his cheats hadn't arrived, otherwise the surprise that belonged to him would turn into a fright. There is no golden finger in hand after crossing, one can imagine what the situation will become. Doug, what's wrong with this kid? Noting what Hayden said, coupled with the meaning revealed in his eyes, gave him the feeling that Hayden hadn't met him before. Green Pheasant didn't understand what happened to Hayden, so he asked the ship doctor who would stand next to him, that is, Doug. Lieutenant General Kuzan, looking at the situation of this child, it seems that the previous injury seems to have damaged the brain and caused a disease. Normal functions such as consciousness, memory, and identity have been destroyed. Speaking of this, Doug couldn't help but glanced at Lieutenant General Kuzan secretly. After all, the child was frozen all over when he was taken on the boat, and Lieutenant General Kuzan's ability is. Although he had some thoughts in his heart, he did not dare to ask, nor did he want to know. In short, this kid has lost his previous memories. Doug concluded. Amnesia. The green pheasant did not expect this result, he was very surprised. Originally, taking this kid on board was to see how he would react after waking up. However, he really didn't expect this situation of amnesia. Although this kid should be good at heart, but what happened before? Moreover, the power he could explode at such an age could not allow him to wander freely in the sea. Chapter 13 Very Smart, Marin Vando. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Split. Where's my hair? Hayden stared at himself in the mirror, and his eyes were about to protrude into the mirror. There was an extremely miserable cry from his mouth, and the whole person was in a state of collapse. When he returned to the ward before, he just noticed that there was a small mirror on the table. He just woke up and felt a strange chilly sensation on his head. He didn't think much about it, but if there was a mirror, just look at it. However, the self that appeared in the mirror was astonishingly the hairless and bald version of self. Even though he has become a child, his general appearance can be distinguished from what he was when he was a child. All aspects of the body are normal, except that the whole body is a little sore after waking up. But, where did my hair go? Feeling that at this moment, Hayden, who was extremely clever and turned into Saitama-sensei, showed his expression as if he had been played badly. This is the end of the matter. Once he accepts his bald head setting, he seems to get used to it. Then it didn't take long before Hayden in the cabin felt that the naval ship had stopped. Curiously standing by the porthole and looking out, suddenly what appeared in front of me was a large swath of red color. The angle of the side scuttle, the entire line of sight cannot be closed. Everything in Pirate World makes Hayden feel very fresh, just like a dumpling entering the city. Look here, look there. Hayden couldn't help but walked out of the cabin and stood in the corridor outside the house, noting that the Navy fleet had come below the Red Earth continent. It is the continent that is covered with red soil and towers high into the clouds. It belongs to the special geography in the pirate world. Together with the Great Sea Route, it divides the world's seas into 4 parts: the East China Sea, the South China Sea, the West China Sea, and the North Sea. Advertisement. He leaned on the railing and looked towards the deck below. A group of seamen surrounded the side of the warship near the Red Earth continent, as if installing something. If the ship was sailing on a windless zone before, how could it cross the Red Earth continent? Hayden, who was curious about everything, couldn't help thinking in his heart, and then he thought about it. After going to the Red Earth continent, it doesn't mean that you are going to Mariagioa, the lair of the stinking dragon. Bye. Hayden thought of this in his mind and quickly got back into the cabin. Since such things as Tianlongren have come into this world, there is no reason to let them go. It's just that Hayden, who is still a kid, decided to let them go. Next. I don't know how long it took. Hayden, who had studied his gold fingers in the ward, was called out. At this time, Hayden only knew that he had gained the power of the god of death, and the knife that was leaning on the bed before was his Zhanpaku knife. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. As for other things, he hasn't found out yet. Then, after leaving the cabin, he noticed that he had come to a completely different place again. He came to the naval headquarters that maintained law and order on the sea and obeyed justice. The headquarters of naval forces scattered all over the seas around the world, and you can feel the aura from the headquarters building itself from a distance. A group of high-rise buildings with unique facilities such as observation points stand alone around them. What attracted his attention most was the huge building in the middle of the building complex, which was the tallest building on the island. On the large external wall below, there are two large characters, Navy, written on it, and the Navy logo is painted in the middle of the words. Immediately afterwards, the warship underneath slowly sailed towards the crescent-shaped harbor on the front. Hayden boarded open black lens bracket Marin Vando close black lens bracket in shock along the way. Advertisement. However, what awaited him is not over yet. Now that he was a child, he looked at all the places where his eyes swept, and he felt so big. The design and construction of the naval headquarters refers to the huge number of strange races and creatures on the sea. Naturally, it goes without saying that the three generals who appeared in the original work are not surprising, regardless of their appearance, just like a normal person eating the natural fruit. But their own height has reached almost 3 meters, so the proportion of certain buildings on the island is a little scary. Hey, kid, follow me. The green pheasant, who was walking silently, suddenly came to Hayden's side and called to him. Damn, Hayden, who was still a little confused in his mind, was caught off guard. Looking back at the green pheasant standing in front of him and covering the sky, where to go? In an indifferent tone. Since the crossing was led by the green pheasant into the Navy, although I don't understand why the green pheasant brought himself specially. However, the green pheasant led him into the Navy, which meant that the green pheasant was his patron. After the green pheasant becomes the admiral of the Navy, his own strength with golden fingers will rise again. Let the green pheasant take care of himself. Then, you can learn from our role model General Huang Yuan. Every day paddling the water to catch the little pirates, and when the time comes to get off work, the salary is still paid, and the happy days will never end. Going a step further, when the strength becomes more and more powerful in the future, you can do what you want to do, and if you encounter any unpleasant things, you will be wiped out. Hey. Hey. At this time, Hayden, who was immersed in following behind the green pheasant, felt happy after thinking about it, and couldn't help laughing. Quote. The green pheasant, who was walking slowly in front, immediately noticed the movement of Hayden behind him. Hayden, who was looking down at his feet, shook his shoulders and let out an inexplicable laughter. Advertisement. The green pheasant took a look and then retracted his gaze. Although he felt strange, he didn't care much about it before he thought it was a strange child. The two walked together for a while. He looked like Hayden, who had participated in an open-day tour of the Navy headquarters led by a lieutenant admiral. This would follow the green pheasant to a white building. Suddenly, there was a pungent smell in the air nearby, indicating that they had come to the hospital. After entering the Naval Medical Institution, more people came and went inside, and the words, Lieutenant General Kuzan, sounded more often. Since joining the Navy, the Kuzan in the new barracks have been known as monsters, not to mention those with the ability of natural fruit. Now he was promoted to the position of Lieutenant Admiral of the headquarters. He is still young. Many Kuzan who has seen in the Navy will naturally become admiral in the future, and may even go further. So, at this time, the green pheasant was in the Navy with a lot of cards. However, Hayden, who was following the green pheasant, also received a lot of attention. Thinking that the green pheasant should have reached the age of marriage, he brought a child to the Navy headquarters. Kuzan's situation is rare. Some strange thoughts have arisen in their hearts. The medical equipment on the warship was not complete, so the green pheasant took Hayden here for a complete full-body examination. Hayden thought this was a necessary procedure to join the Navy, but he didn't think much about it. After waiting for a while, the green pheasant received the inspection report. According to what the doctor in the department told him, except for the damage in the brain, Hayden's body was no longer in serious trouble. The result of the examination is that this kid has a monster-like physical fitness. Although he has lost his memory, there is no problem in general. Looking back in the green pheasant's mind, the Hayden on O'Hara Island lost consciousness after releasing his tricks. At that time, the situation of his whole person can be said with the only breath left. The green pheasant who has seen too much is not sure whether this child can survive. The unexpected result was that after being taken on the boat, this kid woke up on his own under the simple treatment of the boat doctor. At this moment, the green pheasant sitting in the doctor's office couldn't help but look towards the door. Outside the door was Hayden, who was a bun. Chapter 14 Interlacing of Fate. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Ah, that's right. It's this bastard. Absolutely right. In the office of the General of the Navy Headquarters Warring States, holding a picture of Robin, CP9 Chief Spandane yelled. Where did you find it? Have you caught it? He asked anxiously to the seaman standing by. No. The seaman waiting on the side hurriedly replied, using the suspicious girl as a clue. We found her whereabouts on a passenger ship sailing on a small island far to the northeast of O'Hara, but immediately followed lost. Quote. That shit lucky bastard. Spandane was a little anxious. However, there was not much change in the expressions of Warring States and Kuzan in the room. At that time I wanted to chase, but I don't know what happened. The rudder seemed to be frozen and unable to move. Spandane heard a little unwillingly continue to say, it must be Soro who was dying let go of her before. Hearing this, Kuzan sitting behind suddenly became a little stiff, subconsciously blocking his face with his hand, frowning. However, after listening to Spandane's report, the Warring States period sitting at his desk made a decision. Since he is a scholar who can interpret the text of history, no matter how young he is, he cannot ignore it. Then he handed Robin's photo to the goat beside him. The goat opened his mouth to catch the photo and swallowed it as if chewing grass. No matter what means you use, you must be caught and brought to justice as soon as possible. This time the matter is over. After the words of the Warring States period, Spandane, who was instructed to greet him, left the room, followed by two seamen. He happened to have a face-to-face meeting with Lieutenant General Karp, who was about to come in, and noticed that Hayden, who was guarding the door at this time, didn't care much except for Hayden's hairstyle at this time. Advertisement. Being led by the green pheasant to the place of the Warring States, which was still in the general position during this period, Hayden glanced inside when the green pheasant entered just now, just in time to see the relatively young Sengoku at present, plus Karp, the naval hero who just went in for a while. Standing at the door waiting for a long time, Hayden's heart suddenly became a little surging when he was about to fall asleep. He is only one door away from two of the world's top powerhouses. Seeing that both Karp and Warring States had black hair, their combat power should have reached the peak long ago. It seems that everyone he sees now is unusually tall. In the Warring States office, only Warring States, Kuzan, and Karp, who had just entered, were left at this time. Warring States, who is the little monk standing outside? Karp asked curiously while eating a pack of senbei, and found a place to sit down at random. What? The Warring States, who was accustomed to Karp's habits, didn't care, but the question Karp asked made him unclear. Oh, that's a kid I brought. Thinking of Hayden, who had shattered his hair before being frozen, interrupted Kuzan sitting behind. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. This is because the Warring States period and Karp are unknown, so Kuzan didn't seem to have a habit of bringing children before, right? That kid, I'm going to let him join the Navy. Kuzan continued, taking a report from his pocket. Let's not talk about it, Kuzan. O'Hara encountered a powerful enemy and made such a big movement. The Warring States period recalled a photo he had seen before and was curious. In the photo, O'Hara was separated from O'Hara by that terrifying giant ice mark. Obviously this was Kuzan's method, but I just can't think of how to study history on the island with such a trick that Kuzan could use. Karp somehow stood at the desk of the Warring States period, took the photo of the ice mark that was pinched in the hands of the Warring States period at this moment, and couldn't help but exclaimed after reading it. Great, Kuzan. Quote. That was not what I did. Kuzan on the side heard Uncle Carp's praise a little embarrassed. Advertisement. Hearing Kuzan's answer, a question mark suddenly appeared on the heads of Warring States and Carp. This is what the kid I brought with him did. Kuzan then handed the report in his hand to the Warring States period. The report came from an investigation by the Navy's intelligence agency. It showed that Hayden suddenly appeared on the island a few days before the killing order, and then there was nothing else. Regarding the child who grew up to this age, none of the previous records have been found. Suddenly appearing on O'Hara is the only information, and it also means that he is not an aboriginal of O'Hara. Sengoku fell into deep thought after reading the report, and Carp continued to eat senbei as he did not care about his daily life. My ability is the ability to reduce the temperature of my body below the freezing point, and everything I touch will freeze. The green pheasant repeated what Hayden told him at that time. Regarding his ability, this is what he said. The ice mark was cut out by him with a sword. Green pheasant continued, the little devil still has the feeling of a king, although it is fleeting. After a while, the pondering Warring States spoke. If that's the case, then you can figure it out. Although Kuzan has a lazy attitude at times, he is still loyal to the Navy, so there is no problem in letting Kuzan figure it out by himself. Joining the Navy at such a young age, staying in the Navy headquarters, and after the Navy education, will not cause any major problems, and it seems that the potential of this child is immeasurable. Thinking of this, the Warring States then handed the report to the goat who was aside and cleared the documents. That's it, Kuzan. The Warring States said that this is the end of the matter. Then, Kuzan signaled to the General and Lieutenant General Carp and left the room. So, Carp, what are you doing here again? The Warring States period, who was waiting to settle the matter brought by Carp, asked immediately. Advertisement. Kapu, who was eating senbei, stopped for a while. Ha ha ha, I forgot. Carp hesitated for a while and said with an embarrassed smile, not at all embarrassed. The green pheasant walked out of the room and then took Shanghai Deng to the place where the headquarters handled the recruitment procedures. It didn't take long. Hayden, who walked out of that office door, officially became a general servant of the Navy headquarters. The ZA logo printed on the clothes behind him is particularly eye-catching under the blue sky. I'm Sao. Hayden, who was a little short, wore a special general uniform with his bald head, and he felt uncomfortable. Hayden didn't know his exact age, but he guessed it was a kid when he was about his height. Joining now can only start from the bottom to the bottom. Go, I'll take you to where you will live. The green pheasant came out of the room and saw Hayden, who seemed to have lost his color. He shook his head and couldn't help but think that this kid is really not like other ordinary children. Chapter 15 Navy Diary. The weather is fine. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. The moon was exceptionally round tonight, and the night wind blowing in from outside the window fluttered white paper, and Hayden quickly found something to hold it down. Looking at the scenery outside the window, the willow trees outside the house are swaying and dancing in the wind under the silver light. My memory seems to be occupied by what happened after I joined the Navy recently, forgetting the past. Hayden's diary. Haiyuan calendar 1502, a certain month and a certain day, the weather is fine. About half a year has passed since I joined the Navy. Fortunately, his grandmother is tall. The Navy just asked me to be a generalist, and didn't really want to do a generalist. Since the second day of joining the Navy, he was thrown into a so-called training camp by the green pheasant. As soon as he was 4 or 5 years old, he was trained with a kid who was similar to him, and his height was uneven. The first month is the most uncomfortable, and I have never had such a squeezed uninterrupted exercise. But still clenched his teeth, because he could dream of the sea kings he had seen in the windless zone before. It's just damn it. It's just sheer huge, and it's scary to think about it. Fortunately, Goldfinger actually comes with novice benefits, and presented an initial solution of Bao Dao and Shu Baishui. During the period, the green pheasant came here several times, gave some guidance, and then disappeared. Unexpectedly, the green pheasant, who was labeled Lazy Justice, in the previous impression, was so busy during the Lieutenant General. Sure enough, he couldn't make judgments based on the comics he had read before, and could only be used as a rough reference. Then, I gradually got acquainted with the other people who were training together, either the official second generation of the headquarters or the real monsters. Advertisement. After thinking about it carefully, these should be the ones who can be brought to the Navy headquarters for training at their current age. His height has also grown a lot under the high energy and high nutrition food in this Navy cafeteria. Tomorrow I don't know if the half-year assessment they said is true. At this point, Hayden stopped writing, blew out the illuminated paper lamp, and got into the bed. Bento. Would you like a delicious bento? The cries from a small store in the town of Molenvander were mixed in the noisy environment in the morning at this moment. Little monk, what are you doing? Tina knocked her fist on Hayden's head and made a ding sound. Tina is puzzled, she said again. Ouch. Standing at the entrance of the bento shop, Hayden was in a daze and screamed. He couldn't help but put his hands on the top of his head and looked at Tina, who was about the same height as him. Half a year has passed. Although Hayden has grown his hair long ago, he seems to be accustomed to the feeling of lacking hair. The two have traded between the two. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. It seems that because of his own ice snow Zhanpakudao knife and the reason that he has not been completely rested in the recent period, Hayden's posture has also become lazy, just like being infected by a green pheasant. And Tina, I remember I met within a few days after entering the training camp. At that time, because of the weak body of the chicken who had just crossed over, she was really able to sling him at will if she picked anyone from the training camp. Moreover, he learned that the minimum requirements for recruits in the Navy headquarters are more than 2,000 push-ups, 100 back and forth climbing single ropes, 200 laps running, and the practice until one of them faints. The goal of the people in this training camp is obviously not enough to be a small soldier in the headquarters. It is conceivable that they have surpassed Hayden at this stage. And apparently watching the bald Hayden look like a bully, after observing his situation for a few days, Hayden was blocked in the alley. Fortunately, Tina, who was passing by, saved his dog's life in time. Tina belongs to the more powerful group in this training camp, and she also has the most powerful person in this training camp behind her, that is Small. Advertisement. During this period, when he joined the Navy Smog, he had already eaten the natural fruit of smoke and smoke. It can also be said that he had eaten the natural fruit before he came to the Navy headquarters for training. The current so-called training camp is just a transitional role for him. Next year, he will be able to directly join the new barracks led by Navy Admiral Zepha. As for how Hayden is familiar with Tina and her good relationship. Hayden, who was rescued from the dog's life, heard Tina's mantra coupled with her appearance of pink hair, and easily recognized her as the Tina in the comics. He pulled out a book, How to Get Girls' Love, from his memory, and simply recognized her as her little brother. Sister, don't knock me on the head. Hayden, with a stick behind him, complained to Tina next to him while rubbing the top of his head. Tina is happy. Tina kept her original taste. Let's go, it's time to assemble, the instructor seems to be announcing something. She said quickly, pulling Hayden's sleeves behind Shirayuki's belt and pulling him away. My lunch. Seeing that delicious bento gradually drifted away from him, Hayden couldn't help but yelled. Today you little bunnies can relax. Tomorrow is the semi-annual combat assessment. This is an opportunity to test the results of your continuous training. At that time, high-level naval officers will come to visit. You should understand what this means. Inside the school, the instructor, who was half a body taller than everyone in the training camp, told them aloud. Come, here. Hayden, who was standing at the front of the queue, said silently while looking at the instructor who had been teaching them. His head couldn't help but look at the people standing on his left and right. Tina, Smog, Zon Taumaru, Kui di Dalmesia, Daubman II, Raman Gumal, and others standing behind him, etc. Hayden's eyes couldn't help but stopped on Raman Gumir's body. This person was the one who blocked him in the first place. He was a second-generation official. Advertisement. But his own strength is also okay. It seems to be the leader of the second-generation forces in this battalion. However, Raman's eyes also noticed Hayden, who was staring at him, and there was a few flashes in his eyes, and a smirk flashed. Hayden knew exactly what the expression in Raman's eyes meant. However, after half a year of unremitting persistence, he was no longer the same self who had just passed through. The breasts, it happened to be packed back through the combat assessment. Then he heard the instructor continue to say, "I hope you will show a beautiful and exhausting battle, showing your spirit of not admitting defeat." "For justice," said the instructor yelled. "For justice." The other people in the training camp also yelled in agreement. This brainwashing education all the time. Fortunately, the soul in Hayden's body is not a real child. After shouting the slogan, the instructor picked up a wooden box placed aside and said immediately, "Now, line up one by one to draw lots. The names drawn will be your opponents in the first game tomorrow." Afterwards, they stepped forward one by one, reached into the box and took out a small note. Small verses. Dewey Walker. Quadi Dalmesia vs Stone Arnold. Tina vs Dick Rodney. Battle Momomaru vs Uchimura. Hayden vs Raman Gumir. Chapter 16 The Navy Team Gathers, Recommendation Ticket, Collection. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. The whole dormitory area was extremely cold this morning, and a ray of light shone from the horizon in the distance, which happened to shine through the window. Hayden closed his eyes and sat cross-legged on the bed. Shubaishue lay flat on his lap by him, slowly trying to calm the mixed thoughts in his mind. Immediately afterwards, the mind-to-heart communication is flooded with spirits in the atmosphere of the whole world, perceiving everything around him. The dark red ribbon was flying around him, extending continuously, flowing out from the window, and spreading out in all directions. He hasn't mastered this skill thoroughly, but he can only roughly grasp a vague outline. Everyone's Reiatsu is unique, and there is no such thing as two individuals with the same Reiatsu. Reiatsu will rise sharply because of its full spiritual power, being on the verge of danger, or being stimulated by strong emotions. In Hayden's perception world at this time, in the dormitory area, among all the people in his training camp, everyone's spiritual pressure is just about to move, and the white spiritual network that should normally be wrapped around them quietly, at this moment, has its own different head-lifting phenomenon. This situation means that other people have awakened. Since he can roughly feel the pressure of other people around him, he can perceive a dark world, which is the vision of perception. There was a person in the training camp whose ray pressure was stronger than the ray pressure that he was slowly increasing every moment. Even today, the gap between him and that person has not changed much. As for the rest of the people, there are still 2 or 3 people with similar levels of ray, and he can't tell whether his ray pressure is higher or lower. In normal training days, the same project is repeated every day, and then boring sparring training. Although there are losses and losses in the usual sparring training, everyone knows that the opponent hasn't used real strength. Sparring training exercises everyone's empty-handed combat, or swordsmanship, etc., and exercises their own skills. Their own strength, speed, and their own talents are also limited, and it is not based on the prerequisite of life or other important reasons. Advertisement. Therefore, he couldn't judge the opponent's accurate strength from the results of past sparring training, so he could not find out who was higher than his spiritual pressure. But it doesn't matter. This time, let us have a good touch and see who is going to do the job. Speaking of which, I haven't had a real actual battle to test my achievements in the second half of the year. At this time, a ray of morning light of the first rising sun shone on Hayden's face. The sudden sensory stimulation caused Hayden to open his eyes in a trance and stand up, and then cut off the sensor network. Shu Baishui inserted it back easily, and he placed it in the scabbard accurately. The frost that flicked across the dark pupils swept away the chaos in front of him. There is still a bit of time left for the morning meeting. Hayden came to the town of Malenvander, wearing a big soldier costume. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Make your hair look like a strong man and put on a handsome costume. Hayden trimmed the long-inch hair style again and knocked on the door, but he hadn't opened the door in the morning, but he had been eyeing the door of the clothing store for a long time, and bought the clothes he liked for a long time. The upper body is similar to that handsome group of Leopard King Grimju in the Grim Reaper, with a pure white open half-length sleeves, a belt tied on the lower body, and a pair of pure white trousers similar to a training suit. In his heart, Hayden thought about why he liked this suit. It seemed that it was probably because of the Zhanpaku sword in his sleeve Bishwabing. He always liked to wear no clothes and became a shirtless swordsman. However, against the strong dissatisfaction gaze of the owner of the clothing store, the self reflected in the mirror of the clothing store is simply handsome. After half a year of intensive training, Hayden has already forged a stylish figure. The open front design just reveals his proud 8-pack abs, with clear contours and clear lines. The pure white sleeves can cover his strong biceps. Advertisement. The muscular legs also provide him with strong explosive power and mobility. Perfect, perfect, perfecto. After finishing all the preparations, Hayden, with a big bun in his mouth, hurriedly ran to the school where he usually trained. Gudong. Hayden just rushed to the school field when he swallowed the last bite, and the school field had a different calm at this moment. The school grounds were surrounded by high walls, so he didn't know the specific situation inside at this time. Hayden didn't think much about it, and stepped into the school grounds. The school grounds were already complete, leaving only the training camp members who Hayden hadn't arrived. Hearing the movement from the gate, their eyes turned to Hayden involuntarily. However, the uncontrollable people were disappointed. It was not the instructor who came, but Hayden. This kid who was thrown in by Lieutenant General Kuzan casually half a year ago. At this time, the eyes of everyone revealed their disdain for Hayden, perhaps a sneer, or perhaps a mockery. Hayden naturally didn't care about the unkind look at him. If it was the original world, as long as there was a hint of fear, they could swallow you alive. He has always been alone, and he understands this very well. Looking left and right, only the people in the training camp were scattered around the school grounds, and the instructor was not seen. Then Hayden walked slowly towards the place where Tina and Smog were standing together. After all, he hadn't greeted the eldest sister today. Hey, brother, what kind of perverted costume are you wearing today? Tina looked at Hayden who was approaching and couldn't help but vomit, and then she couldn't help poking Hayden's open chest with her right index finger. Advertisement. Ah! Hayden couldn't help but shrink back a step. Sister, don't make trouble. He cried out. If it's a frontal blow from a fist, he can still withstand it, but a special attack from the female department can't stand it. Yo, you did a good job. Tina is very optimistic about you. Tina, who had felt Hayden's body, immediately patted Hayden on the shoulder, and said in a tone that looked after her little brother. Because of Tina, I also got acquainted with Hayden, Smog and others, involuntarily moving in sync, and at the same time resting his right hand on his forehead. In the words Hayden often said, these two silly. After that, the waiting time was fleeting. The instructor responsible for teaching this training camp strode in from the door, without a trace of expression. Soon after, Hayden noticed in his sight. The current Admiral Sengoku came in calmly in a white suit, followed by Admiral Zepha and the chief instructor of the Naval Academy in a purple suit, and then Lieutenant General Karp in a swaggering posture, as if he was always holding a bag of immortals in his hand. Shell. Then a group of generals of the Navy headquarters came in one by one, and the green pheasant was among them. What they have in common is that they wear white coats with the word, Justice, behind them without exception. At this moment, the top Navy group stood upright in front of their 30-odd training camp. Usually I can only meet one or two occasionally, and their spiritual pressure fluctuations are still within a normal range. However, at this time, even if the spiritual pressure within the normal range is gathered together, the white spiritual network in Hayden's perception world is also intertwined, forming a giant column straight into the sky, full of pressure. A drop of cold sweat slipped down his cheeks unconsciously, and Hayden's legs were a little out of control. Chapter 17 Coax Duni. Seeking Collection. Seeking Recommendation Ticket. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. The legs were shaking uncontrollably, not because they were frightened by the big guys standing in front of them. It was because of the indescribable excitement that came out of Hayden's heart, which made him a little bit uncontrollable when he was infected with lazy cancer in the early stage. This will be his first truly serious duel, and he wants to win with one effort. Don't tell me what a failure is. I want to win, and victory belongs to me alone. Hayden thought to the instructor who had already walked in front of them. Listen. The instructor stood in front and said loudly. Today is the fighting assessment once every 6 months, show your full strength. A group of high-level people behind me will evaluate all aspects of you in the future based on your demonstrated strength. At this point, the instructor paused. Although the expressions on the faces of other people in the training camp were different, they still maintained good discipline and made no noise. Some of them have experienced the semi-annual assessment several times. After the end, the winners will be selected to enter the new barracks led by Admiral Zephyr, and one of the only 3 generals in the entire Navy will guide an exercise. This opportunity can be imagined. And there are also some who perform well. Even if the result is lost, they have a certain chance of being selected. Although it is rumored that the new barracks of General Zephyr were added, a large part of the people were brushed down because they couldn't stand the training level of the devil, but that was also removed by General Zephyr's new barracks. Therefore, all members of the training camp are full of fighting spirit at this moment. For justice. For the Navy. Advertisement. Noting the fighting spirit on everyone's face, the instructor nodded. One last thing. The final winner of this half-year assessment will get a devil fruit, or a good knife. What? I heard that right. The instructor's words hadn't been finished yet, and the other people who were still maintaining discipline just became excited. After so many assessments, there has never been a winner who has a real reward, let alone a devil fruit or a good knife. Whether it's a devil fruit or a good knife, these 2 choices cover people who want to use physical skills or eat the devil fruit in the future, as well as those who want to be a swordsman. They were already full of fighting spirit, and now almost everyone is thinking of using 102% of their strength. But Hayden showed some disinterested expressions. Eating the devil fruit means that you can't go to the sea easily, and what it means to be unable to go to the sea. Sun, beach, sea, swimwear, girls. As for a good knife, isn't it possible that a knife made by a craftsman doesn't have the fragrance of the Zhanpakudao knife that he has transformed with his soul? Okay. All right. Be quiet. The instructor asked their little boys to call twice and then said, now we announce the first duel, Hayden vs Raman Gumir. You have half an hour to prepare. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. After the words fell, the queue suddenly fell silent within a short time. Unexpectedly, the first game will be Raman and Hayden that kid. This is the idea that came out of the rest of the people, they all know the grudge between Raman and Hayden. In this so-called training camp, basically everyone has their own title. A group of talented people gathered together, coupled with daily continuous exercise, have abilities beyond ordinary people. It's just that kid Hayden. Advertisement. In just half a year, from the beginning, that weak and almost ordinary person has kept up with them, and the sparring training during the period has also won and lost. This kid, I don't know where the monster will be picked up by Kuzan. There is also Raman, who likes to find weak people to have fun all day long. He had never thought about why he was found by Lieutenant Admiral Kuzan, who was like Hayden at the beginning, and he was taken directly to the Navy headquarters and thrown into this training camp. In the hearts of everyone who thought of this, there was a good show. After the queue disbanded, the others scattered and stood outside the field, leaving Hayden and Raman in the middle of the school field. A group of high-ranking naval officers who were watching the battle were already seated, sitting on the stands that seemed to be made by one of the fruit abilities capable of creating things. To be honest, they basically came here today just to make a cutscene. The semi-annual stuff is a bit tired for them, and the expressions on almost everyone's faces are a little lacking, but Hayden didn't pay attention either. He now put his whole heart on Raman, the man who was about to be defeated by his sword. Hey, Hayden, his opponent Raman called him at this time. Counting down, we two have known each other for half a year. Do you remember not last time? Raman, with a disdainful expression on his face, said what he thought of this and laughed. I still remember the expression that time. It's clear. The shins that are as thin as a bamboo stick are shaking so hard, you were scared to pee at that time. Raman recalled, holding a knife in his left and right hands and pulling out sword flowers. Raman followed his father, Major General Gumir, using the second sword style, and his posture at this time did not put Hayden in his eyes. After all, no matter how much he exercised, he couldn't compare to the self he had trained since he was a child. But you're lucky, you were saved by a woman in the end. Raman, who continued talking about this, couldn't help nodding, in a yin and yang tone. Quote. That fellow Ramen. Ramen's voice was not deliberately lowered, and the Tina, Smog and others who were nearby could naturally hear it clearly. Seeing Ramen's pose, Tina wanted to rush up and beat the guy. Advertisement. Don't worry, Tina, Smog comforted as he stood by. I heard that Ramen was not selected because of his several assessments, and now the daily training is slack off, and Hayden. The outcome of this duel is not easy to say. Smog stared at Chong Haidang's figure and thought to himself. Half an hour passed in a blink of an eye. The instructor motioned the two to come forward, and he stood in the middle of the two of them. The rule is that the game is not considered a winner until one of the teams is unconscious and loses the ability to fight. The instructor looked at the left and right sides. Hayden nodded to express his understanding, while Ramen stared at Hayden with mocking eyes. Don't attack again after unconscious. Killing is forbidden. The instructor continued to say this, and paused. Begin. In an instant, the instructor who stood in front of him lost his figure with a brush, and the duel officially began. In the next second, still paying attention to the instructor's words, Hayden, who had not had time to understand what was happening, immediately felt the oncoming wind. Looking intently, it was Ramen who came straight forward without any hesitation. After participating in several assessments, Ramen, who knew the instructor's routine, chose to take the initiative to attack and take the initiative. And Hayden was still silly on the spot at this time, just as he expected. All the people standing in the field battle only saw Ramen attack after the duel began, but his opponent still froze in place like a fool. Chapter 18. What about the trust between? Seeking collection, seeking recommendation ticket. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Round. You don't play cards according to the routine. Hayden's faint voice suddenly sounded behind him. Ramen's preemptive plan came to nothing. When did this guy run behind me? Shouldn't his double knives hit him directly? This thought flashed through Ramen's mind. It should be impossible for him to react under his own sudden attack. Even if he reacted to my attack, how did he move behind me after avoiding? After thinking about a lot of Ramen in a flash, he didn't hesitate to move his body, and immediately turned back to face Hayden. Now the positions of the two are just that they have exchanged their positions at the beginning. At the same time, the others standing in the training camp off the court were also confused. Hayden's speed in that step just now surpassed their current dynamic vision. Hayden, who was still in sight just now, they only noticed that under the impact of Ramen, his figure suddenly changed behind Ramen. Right now, some people recalled one of the 6 styles used by the instructor and their elders, shaving. The way Hayden disappeared, at a speed beyond normal, was exactly the same as the effect shown by shaving. Even in this training camp, only the oldest and strongest ones can learn the moves, and they are not proficient. Has that guy learned? The rest of the people watching the battle on the sidelines didn't know what they were thinking. At the same time, on the stands on the other side, a group of high-ranking naval officers were watching the battle. Yo, Kuzan. Is this the little monk you brought back last time? Who do you think will win? Lieutenant General Karp, who was sitting in the stands, suddenly became interested after seeing Hayden's posture, and asked Kuzan who was sitting behind him. Advertisement. Because it was Kuzan who brought a child into the Navy, he still had some impressions of Hayden in his mind. I remember the last time I met this little monk who looked like an ordinary person, but now he has reached this level. At a young age, the potential seems a bit interesting. Well, Uncle Karp, I think it will be that kid. Although Kuzan still had his usual expression on the surface, he couldn't help but feel a little unspeakable expectation in his heart. According to common sense, the physical level of an ordinary person has only been trained for half a year, and it is impossible to compare with his opponent, who has been trained in the Navy headquarters since he was a child. However, the movement of O'Hara was completely out of his own potential power, and the movements on his body did not seem to be trained at all. And now half a year later, how far can he control that power? It was not only Karp and Kuzan who lit up in front of them. The remaining first-class lieutenant generals and major generals were similar, and slightly dispelled some of their boredom, but they did not completely arouse the knowledgeable. The small man can use such speed, but it seems that his footwork in changing positions seems to be a little different from shaving. Time flowed unconsciously, and the red sun of Dongsheng had risen above the two of them. There is no cover in the entire school field, and Hayden and Ramen are facing the dazzling sunlight. A drop of sweat slipped from Ramen's jaw unconsciously, thinking that he should have been careless just now to let Hayden escape. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. At this time, he fixed his eyes on Hayden, observing his vision, center of gravity, posture. These precious practical experience taught him. My next move will get rid of this kid. But Hayden looked at Ramen, who was still, and after observing the expression on his face at this time, he continued, I thought you would continue to talk for a long time. You can't do this. Can't help but sway. He shook his head. His strategy is to control others later. He had thought about it before. He was relatively inexperienced, so he would wait for his opponent to make a move before making a counterattack. The trick he practiced with a bruised nose and swollen face is the basis of his method of combat. At the beginning, I was drooling all the time watching the moves on the skill tree, but they couldn't be exchanged anymore, and I couldn't get points even if I stayed in the Navy headquarters. But he changed his mind to think, aren't the moves that people researched out by themselves? In this way, he racked his brains to recall the description of the footwork of Link C and the instant step, coupled with non-stop practice, and finally completed the move that he became round footwork. It is able to spread out in a circle of 4 or 5 meters in diameter centered on the position where one is standing, and use the incomplete and poor version of the instant step to quickly dodge at a speed that the enemy cannot see clearly. Advertisement. Quote. Ramen, who stood opposite him, noticed Hayden's seemingly expressionless face, but it seemed to mock him. Suddenly, Ramen couldn't help but burst into anger. I asked you to trick you bald boy and installed it. Come on. Hayden hooked towards Ramen. Whether it's defense, dodge, or attack, in order to prevent Ramen from guessing his intentions, there is also a certain amount of space to react. At this moment, Hayden's feet were beating lightly just like a boxer. With his left hand and left tripod in front of him, his right hand held Shirayuki's knife handle on his back and hid behind him. However, Hayden's actions inconsistent with the weapon he used, coupled with his not very tall height, made the big guys in the stands a bit funny. Hayden, who was originally a swordsman in elementary school, used the posture of a boxer again, and a sense of contradiction arose spontaneously. Ramen looked at Hayden's posture, thinking that he was careless just now. What kind of tricks this fool used? Thinking of this, Ramen no longer waited for an excellent opportunity to shoot, and he kicked his right foot backwards. Dong! 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 In a few large strides, the gap between him and Hayden was quickly skipped. Two swords cross. Ramen crossed the air while holding the knife, and pointed straight at Hayden's door. And Hayden was still beating on the spot like a okay person, seemingly not planning to make a counterattack. Ha, you're done. Ramen couldn't help being overjoyed. In a blink, at the moment when the blade was about to touch Hayden's body, Ramen felt as if the time around him slowed down. Hayden, Tina and others on the sidelines were naturally aware of the danger Hayden was facing at the moment. Advertisement. Round. Suddenly, Hayden appeared behind Ramen again. Ramen felt that Hayden should have been cut this time, but he still rushed for nothing. Benchung thought that because it was the first time that he experienced a formal duel, although his opponent was Ramen who had troubled him before, he still wanted to wait a little longer and observe. As a result, it is really boring. It seems that only the training camp that has a higher Reiki pressure than mine can be interesting, Hayden muttered. Then, while Ramen was in a daze, Hayden immediately pulled out Shirayuki's sleeve behind him, and tapped Ramen's left shoulder with the back of the knife. Do you have any other tricks that you haven't used before, or do you stop here? Get out of here. Feeling Hayden behind him, Ramen turned around abruptly and swung a horizontal cut behind him. However, with the same result, Hayden jumped out of Ramen's attack range. Ramen's breathing began to rush at this time, realizing that he still hadn't hit Hayden, and his heart immediately became more irritable. UTM. In an instant, the atmosphere between the two quieted down. Only the tip of the knife, which was only a centimeter away from his eyeball, interrupted what Ramen was about to say. His opponent Hayden slapped his only blow in this duel. At this time, Shu Baishui's pure white blade tip. Under the effect of the half-start solution, frost froze around Raman's eye sockets. Hayden calmly told the facts between them. You lose. The chill under the scorching sun quietly invaded Raman's brain. Chapter 19. Do you want to learn? I teach you, seeking collection and recommendation ticket. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. 14 years of birth. Since I was conscious, I have been exercising non-stop daily under the teacher arranged by my father. A fist that was bloody because of too many punches, because he couldn't support himself with his legs when he ran, and because the hand holding the handle could no longer be held, the blade fell and scratched the instep. Only with the mixture of blood and tears can I become who I am now. Even so, I insisted on it. For what reason? In order to become a navy that can suppress pirates all over the sea like a father. Why can this guy join us directly when he comes? Why can he surpass me in such a short time? Why can't I see the footsteps of this guy? Why can't it be? The freezing ice and the piercing chill instantly cooled Raman's irritable mood. I looked close in front of my eyes, the tip of the knife shining in the sun. Have I become like this? At this moment, he thought a lot in his complicated mind, but he gradually regained his sanity. I lost. The faces of everyone in the training camp outside the field were a little bit unbelievable. That guy Raman actually lost like this, not to mention what Raman is like, he is also considered to be in the middle of this training camp. He was killed by a kid who had only joined them for half a year. And it was the first time to lose so badly in a duel, it was like being played around. Standing opposite Hayden, Raman's hands holding the knife drooped down very unwillingly, and his hairstyle seemed to go up to the sky. He slowly spit out a sentence from his mouth. What is your trick to change positions? Advertisement. Raman, who accepted the result of the duel, really wanted to know how Hayden escaped him. Seeing Raman's whole body look a little faded, Hayden pulled sleeve Baishui behind his back and said calmly, do you want to learn? I can teach you. Looking back now, in addition to his soaring hair, Raman's expression was a bit begging all day, his strength was also good. Although some things he did were really odd, he was still a child, and he could become a sword of justice after his own training. And it's not wrong to have more friends in the Navy, and there are basically second-generation officials around. At this time, the instructor also stepped forward and announced the result of the duel, interrupting his thoughts. Hayden won the first victory first. Humph. Raman suddenly snorted when Hayden said he still wanted to teach him. Immediately after he retracted his double knives into the scabbards, he went off the field without responding to Hayden. Hayden shrugged indifferently, and walked out of the field and stood aside, preparing to wait for the next arrangement. As soon as she walked back to where Tina and Smog stood, Tina immediately called out, "That's okay, brother." It's Tina's brother. The excitement on her face was as if she had won. Smog, who was standing next to him, didn't care about Tina, and immediately asked Hayden, "Hayden, did you shave just now?" Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Seeing Tina's smile, Hayden couldn't help but laugh. Strictly speaking, it's not shaved, but it's almost the same. He answered small. Even though he had this trick, he was still a little bit uncertain about going to Smog. Without the domineering blessing, he couldn't cut the entity and even hit a few. Thinking of this, Hayden couldn't help but sigh in his heart. The magic of nature. It can be said that as long as you eat it, you can directly dominate the first half of the great root. For ordinary people, it is simply a treasure in one step. But after another thought, the shortcoming of not being able to go into the sea is still a bit fatal. Shaking his head and no longer thinking about it, Hayden went back to chatting with Tina, Smog and the others, waiting for the start of the next one. And in the intermittent time, a group of big men in the stands. Kapu, do you know what the kid used? The Warring States asked Karpu, who was sitting next to him. Although the Warring States period saw Hayden's footsteps clearly, Hayden's footwork was different from shaving, and he didn't understand what it was. Advertisement. Shave is to step on the ground several times to produce a reaction force to move at a high speed, but the kid's frequency is still a few times short, but he can have the same speed, as if there is some invisible force on his feet. Quote. Karp slowly said what he was thinking. The result of the duel between Hayden and Raman is not important to them. They immediately knew which side would win this game after Hayden showed his footwork. What's important is that Hayden at this age has developed a footwork that is as effective as shaving himself, this potential talent. Not to mention the sword skills he used, which has the same ability as Kuzan frozen fruit. Impenetrable kid. Immediately afterwards, the instructor standing in the field hurriedly announced the next duel. Small versus Dewey Walker. Don't look at it, the results of this game have been answered as early as when the lottery was selected. Smog on the field faced the opponent's naturally swollen match. Armed sex domineering seems not only to be about the same age, but also to have a certain level of physical fitness to acquire. None of them met the conditions, and this test shouldn't allow Smog to play. Hayden, who would be standing on the sidelines, looked at Smog's calm and completely different expressions from those off the court, and couldn't help thinking of the future plot in his heart. At the beginning of the plot, there were not many natural abilities in the Navy. Under the care of the Green Pheasant and Zeph's teaching, you finally got into the East China Sea. Thinking of it, it was so swollen that I didn't listen to the boss's instructions before it fell to that point. Looking at Dewey Walker again, this Smog's opponent had already given up in his heart when he was drawn, and immediately abstained after he got on stage. After that, some bigwigs in the stands walked away a lot. The duel continued, one after another. Qui D Dalmesia vs Stone Arnold. Qui D wins. Tina vs Dick Rodney. Tina wins. Battle Momomaru vs Yukimura. Battle Momomaru won. Advertisement. Drew Kibbing vs Doberman 2. Doberman 2 wins. There are still a few games, all of which have been compared today. Hayden, Tina, Smog and others entered the second round of the assessment. Except for lunch, Hayden has been on the sidelines to observe the confrontation between the two sides on the court. After all, one of them will be his opponent in the next round. If he knows his opponent's performance on the court in advance, he can make some slight adjustments. At the same time, he also found a few powerful people. In normal training, everyone's performance is basically the same, but when it comes to this game, there are beginning to be differences. But that's the way it was. Hayden was a little excited in his heart. How can you go further than with others, and he likes the feeling of winning. At that moment, the feeling of saying the three words, "You lost," was barely said. The first day of the game has all ended. At this moment, only all the training camp members and their instructors were left in the school grounds. The big guys in the stands had already gone before the duel was halfway through. Either he was called away by something, or his kid was more dying than the one who lost his breath, or he was really bored. In the evening, the red day in the sky gradually faded. In the fading school grounds, the instructor took out the confrontation board prepared by the staff who had been recording next to him, and it displayed information about tomorrow's confrontation. Smog vs Cuddy Dalmesia. Tina vs. Momomaru. Doberman 2 vs Hayden. Chapter 20. Alley at the Edge of the Lights. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Marine Fodor, the headquarters of the Navy, can be said to be the safest island in the sea except for the holy place of Mereggio since the beginning of the Great Pirate Era. At least one general is guarded at all times, plus a group of generals and tens of thousands of naval elites, and the fortifications with intact weapons and defense facilities can be described as bronze walls and iron walls. Even at night, the town of Molenvander was still crowded with bright lights. Some seamen on duty during the day come out to hang out after get off work, some are generals who have just returned to their headquarters after a mission to relax, and some are family members who come out for a walk after dinner. The town is more lively at night than during the day. The evening after the end of the first round of assessment. Tina dragged her little brother Hayden and Smog and the gang that they had been playing well, walked and swayed, and went to the barbecue restaurant in town, ready to celebrate. Celebrate that all of them have entered the second round, and none of them have been eliminated. Also, the curry rice served in the Navy canteen is really about to be vomited. Although the curry is delicious, it will feel like after a few years, that's it. Immediately everyone obeyed Tina's proposal. At night, a group of people went into the famous Teppanyaki grill in the town, talking and laughing. In the evening, it is the prime time for the barbecue restaurant to open. At this time, the seats in the room separated by screens are almost full. The hot business didn't make them wait long, and the waiter who had noticed the arrival of new guests hurried forward when he was free. he smiled and greeted Tina, who was standing in the middle of the group. He noticed that Tina was the only girl among the guests, so she naturally gave priority to women. "Madam, how many people do you want?" the waiter asked as he led them to a multi-person seat. Advertisement. 5. Bring me 5 extra large set meals. Tina didn't feel embarrassed, and immediately ordered the dishes, and then took her seat. Hayden, Smog and others also sat there immediately. It didn't matter what they ordered. For those who are hungry, they just need to eat meat. Today's fighting duel really consumes too much physical energy. On average, there is no time for 1.5 hours, but the physical energy consumption is extremely fast, as each of them is like. After sitting down, Hayden set aside the sleeve baishui on his back and couldn't help leaning back, closing his eyes to feel it carefully. After a tiring day, eating with some friends in the evening, listening to the noise from the hustle and bustle of the city, the people at the table next door bragging about how much he won today, in short, some ordinary things of the folks in the village. Looking at him again, the fat and thin characteristic sea beast meat was sizzling, seductively shiny, and smelling of gluttonous people. After a cup of ice cola, Hayden felt as if he had returned to the original world. The difference is that he now has a group of friends as company. This is not to say that it means a bad thing. On the contrary, he likes this feeling, he has a pleasant feeling. After 5 people ate it for a while. "Brother, you can do it today." After Tina drank a few glasses of orange juice, she a little bit her head and shouted at Hayden, "You actually hit a hand for me, no. You give me a drink." Said that he stretched out half of the orange juice in his hand and motioned to clink glasses with her. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Hayden was a little dazed, why Tina blushed even after drinking orange juice. I couldn't help but observe Tina carefully through the white smoke rising in front of her. At this moment, her cheeks seemed to be blushed on both sides, her eyes were still a bit blurred. Hayden's dumbfoundedness also made him laugh. Come here. Apart from anything else, he didn't care about so much, who was equally happy, and had a glass of ice cola in his hand with Tina. However, Small, Dick, Duddy. The 3 people sitting next to them noticed the 2 of them. The barbecue caught in their chopsticks fell back to the iron plate without knowing it. The 3 couldn't help but glance at each other. Advertisement. These 2 guys really can't help them. They didn't say it, but believed that the same thoughts were in each other's hearts at this time. ... Remaining clouds in the wind, like locusts crossing the border. The 5 quickly resolved the battle and cleaned up 5 extra large meals. By the way, this store's extra large set meal refers to a set meal that can't be eaten with an adult's appetite. However, the waiters who were standing at their table waiting to check out were not surprised. The residents of the island are all Navy family members who are naturally knowledgeable, and their group of children can be said to have little food. What? So much? Tina suddenly yelled when she heard the checkout number, and she was soberly scared that she was leading her. Tina's movements can't help but make the waiter wonder in her heart. Seeing that their big-handed group looks like people who lack this little money. Then he calmly continued. Yes, ma'am. Just now, she was so proud of her order, but when she was about to pay the bill, Tina started to spend a lot of time. As their eldest sister, she wanted to be majestic, but she did not expect it. Sister, didn't you say good ah? Hayden, who was standing next to him, opened his mouth at this moment and saw Tina's body twisted at this time. His mouth opened wider, and he couldn't smile. Later, Smog and others also took out their Bailey and gathered together to settle the bill. The short episode did not affect much. Advertisement. After that, the 5 people went out of the rotisserie together talking and laughing. At the same time, they noticed the situation on the street outside, and it seemed that it was too early. They were full of drinks and meat and prepared to go back to the dormitory to rest. After all, their assessment is not over yet, and tomorrow is the beginning of the second round. Just when their group swayed on the street, suddenly, Ramen Gumir appeared in front of them and blocked their way. Hayden, come with me. Ramen stared at Hayden and then spoke out. Hayden didn't speak, but Smog first responded. Ramen, you should go back to the dormitory. This guy Ramen lost the duel and wanted to find something, so his tone at this time seemed a little low. I immediately understood what Smog's words meant, and Ramen hurriedly continued. It's not what you think, I really have something to do with Hayden. He didn't want to mess with a natural department, let alone even Hayden couldn't win. Noting Ramen's expression when he was speaking, Smog, who couldn't understand, frowned. Before he or Hayden could speak, Tina Huo, who was a little confused, said, FKU. Get Tina aside. Don't get in the way. Seeing Tina's appearance, Ramen didn't know what to do at this time. After a while, Hayden broke the embarrassment. Well, go there to talk. He said. The stiff Ramen got Hayden's response, and he was a little excited. Just over there, over there. He quickly pointed to a place and said. Smog didn't understand what Hayden was going to do. He turned his eyes to Hayden and asked him with his eyes. Immediately afterwards, Hayden told Smog and the others not to wait for him, and told them to return to the dormitory first. Chapter 21 Smoke Fruit Dual Physical Stamina. Seeking Collection. Seeking Recommendation Ticket. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. After that, it didn't take long. In an empty alley, Hayden and Ramen are standing in it. Hayden leaned against the wall, while Ramen stood in front of him with his head down. Ramen took what he wanted to say. He has been struggling since losing in the morning duel, but he still couldn't say it. Hayden looked at Ramen in front of him. He was running out of patience. He immediately asked, What do you want me to do? Ramen's expression was taken aback at the moment, without the arrogant expression he had before. After a while, thinking that it would be useless to consume it like this, Ramen summoned the courage in his heart. I want to learn from your Hayden. He hesitated to say these words from his mouth. Hayden leaned back in confusion. JPG. Do you want me to teach you the trick during the day? He asked immediately. Hayden had already guessed when Ramen approached him just now, but he didn't expect it to be true. Ramen answered Hayden quickly. Since I was a child, I have been adhering to the current skills every day, and finally I ran into Hayden, a man who had only trained with them for half a year. There was no excuse, it was just pure crushing, and it was lost to him. A strange thought came up in Ramen's heart. If he trains with Hayden, will he be able to keep up with him, and he will become stronger? At the end of the day, Hayden already had the idea of turning Ramen into a younger brother, but this time he was thinking about it after hearing Ramen's answer. Ramen noticed Hayden's frowning expression at this time, and the emotions in his heart became more disturbed. After a while, thinking that he couldn't agree to be too casual, Hayden, who pretended to be deep, guessed that the time was almost the same. He spoke again. Yes, you can train with me after the game is over. Really? Thank you, Hayden. After hearing Hayden's answer, Ramen became excited. The look, posture, etc. of the whole person would not be at all like the arrogant him before, as if he was scared back to the prototype by Hayden during the daytime game. After getting excited, Ramen couldn't help but want to get closer to Hayden. Advertisement. What is this kid doing? Hayden watched Ramen stick to his trend, and a question mark couldn't help but pop up on his head. Ahem. Suddenly, a voice that did not belong to the two of them, a voice from the third person sounded. What are you two doing? Lieutenant General Kuzan, who happened to pass by, was standing in the alley and asked. Different from the brightly lit world outside the alley, the bodies of two men are about to stick together in the small alley without light. I'm Sao. When he noticed the people coming, he was still a green pheasant, and Hayden, who was about to push Ramen away, suddenly nodded his head. What you see is not what you thought in your heart. Hayden finished quickly, but his panic expression seemed to be covering up. Ramen stood up straight and hurriedly saluted the green pheasant, Lieutenant General Kuzan. Well, don't be so serious. The green pheasant waved his hand quickly, and he came out after eating. Tomorrow's assessment is not over yet, you should go back. The green pheasant, who thought it was late, immediately warned them both. Hayden doesn't have the concept of subordinates and superiors to the green pheasants. I see, we will go back soon. He said casually. After that, Hayden and Ramen returned to the dormitory together. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. I close my eyes all night, and then I open them again. The early morning came the next day. Damn. An uncontrollable sensation developed in his legs, causing Hayden to grin while rubbing his calf after waking up. The trick called Yuan is not without cost. If you want to move at super high speeds, the load on your leg muscles will naturally be more than normal. Although the muscles felt a little uncomfortable after the exercise yesterday, Hayden did not feel any problems. As a result, after I didn't want to sleep all night, the feeling of a little soreness yesterday suddenly became clear. The tingling sensation that stimulated the brain seemed to slowly transfer from the lower body to the whole body. Advertisement. However, this pain was not enough for Hayden to become a problem for him. In the past 6 months, in order to exceed the limits of his body, he doesn't know how many times he has been more serious than this, but every time he clenched his teeth and persisted. This is his second chance. He who has not seen the sea yet does not want to fall on the training ground. I'm Sao. Hayden got up, ignoring the feeling his body conveyed to him. Afterwards, he rushed to the training camp school grounds, ready to wait for the assessment to start the next day. Today, there are no big guys in the stand created out of thin air, only people from their training camp. The instructor walked to their standing team and announced the 2 sides of the first game today. Smog vs Cuddy Dalmesia. The natural fruit ability player is facing one of the top players in this training camp. After the announcement, the team immediately became noisy. Smog vs Quincy. The two are a powerful match, which is a strong match. Smog's physique is not as powerful as Quincy, but Quincy, who has a monster-like stamina, can't hurt Smog. Now there is really a good show to watch. Some people who love to watch can't help but think to themselves in their hearts. Hayden, who was also on the sidelines, looked at Small, then at Quincy. Smog's body shape is almost 1.6 meters, 1.7 meters, and he has surpassed other ordinary people of his age at his age. However, Quincy Dalmesia, whose father is Major General Dalmesia, is a capable person who has eaten the fruit of the dog, the Dalmatian form. He has inherited his father's burly figure, and he is now taller than Smol, gets about half a head out. The two of them are also the people who are about to join the new barracks of General Zepha. Hayden also knew that this would be interesting. Speaking of it, he hasn't really seen Quincy show his true strength, only knows that his empty-handed combat is very powerful. After a while, the others waited to make room for the two of them and cleared the playing field. At this moment, Smog, Quincy and the instructors were standing on the field. The instructor standing between the two of them immediately gestured. Begin. Advertisement. The back figure flashed off the court, and the game officially started. Puff. Since Smog, who was in the elemental state, launched an attack first, his lower body turned into billowing white smoke, and the entity's upper body rushed towards Quincy, with his right hand clenched into a fist. I'm coming. Seeing this trick, the crowd in the appearance battle made a movement. This is Smog's signature trick, the white smoke launcher. Then someone from the crowd answered. Then someone excitedly said a long paragraph. The lower body of the body suddenly turned into smoke, and in an instant, the explosive reaction force was generated by spraying the smoke, and it moved quickly, and then cooperated with the strike of the upper right fist. A trick that can't be avoided. However, it is not the first time that Quincy has seen this trick. His feet stomped on the ground forcefully, and he withdrew back. Between a few breaths, his figure had flashed behind him. Smog failed with one blow. It seems that the speed of his aerosolization is not as fast as Quincy's footsteps, Hayden thought when he noticed. However, after elementalization, he can freely turn around in the air, so he should have followed. At this time, the two entered the chase round. Suddenly, he fell into a stalemate. Cuddy always withdrew back to avoid every attack of Smog. Smog followed closely and attacked whenever he felt he had a chance to hit Quincy. However, they are almost the same at the same speed, they just switch around and change their appearances on the court. The crowd watching the game off the court also entered a quiet atmosphere, basically staring at Smog and Quincy on the court with dull eyes. With the speed shown, Smog shook the ground fist from time to time but shattered the compacted ground, and Quincy stepped back and stepped on the ground with pits of various sizes. Different from yesterday's small fights, the situation at the venue has become a mess. At this time, most people who watched the game had the same idea in their hearts. These two guys are not monsters of the same level as them. And Hayden's eyes were full of excitement. These two guys were really strong, and immediately he couldn't help thinking in his mind that he was ignited by the ice and snow elements. 7%. Chapter 22 Sleeve Baishui. Shuangluo, seeking collection, seeking recommendation ticket. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. The duel between Small and Quidi finally ended the game in a way that everyone hadn't thought of off the court. As those who watched the game off the court could see, Quidi, who had a monster-like stamina, did not use a single move, and his body shape was able to avoid Smog's attacks every time. Physical exhaustion. However, he still stood firmly on the court. The sweat beaded on his head and his chest rising and falling with shortness of breath were the only negative states he showed, without any scars. This game is not very important to Smog. He doesn't need the rewards after victory, and it's just a game, not a life and death fight. In this way, he could not hold Quidi's body, his strength and patience were exhausted, he gave up the game. There are restrictions on the rules of the game, you can't have a good time, and losing the game doesn't mean anything. The two who had decided between the winners and losers were surprised by those who watched the game off the court, and their jaws fell to the ground. Although they all know that the two are very strong, but Smog is a natural one. Guy Quintina actually used his physical strength to kill him. Hayden, who was watching the game off the court, was also shocked. It seems that from morning until now, the two of them seemed to be in a stalemate for an hour or two after you chased me. As a result, Smog's legs were weakened, and the elementalization seemed to be intermittent, and Cuddy could still stand on the court. Judging from his appearance, it seems that he can still be in a stalemate for a while. Quidi couldn't help but feel a strong sense of threat in Hayden's heart. How can I win if I am replaced by Quidi's opponent? This guy's physical strength is almost a bottomless pit, and my physical strength is not that great. Dealing with this kind of persistent guy can only be done quickly, and launch an offensive as soon as he comes up. It is best to solve it with one move. Hayden couldn't help but quickly pre-deduce the scene in his mind, simulating the duel with Quidi in his brain. The instructor didn't mean to stop, time passed little by little, and the game ended one after another. Advertisement. However, in today's second round, Tina and the remaining Duddy did not win the opponent. Tina's opponent Zhanpakudao, the original self-proclaimed, the tightest man in the world and the strongest defensive man in the world, he who can deflate the Straw Hat group is naturally very strong in his youth. Time passed, and then he went to the sea and boarded the field. His opponent was Doberman 2. Immediately, Hayden and his opponent Doberman 2 stepped onto the court. After the two sides stood still, the crowd in the field battle immediately rang out. Doberman, kill that kid for me. Doberman, come on. Don't you lose to a kid who can lose even Ramen. Hayden kept listening to the ridicule of him off the court, and even Ramen was taken along with him. Ramen, who lost to Hayden, the kid, has been expelled from the second generation. In their eyes, Ramen immediately became about the same level as Hayden. Hayden on the field had a blank expression on his face, but he burst into laughter, thinking that you guys are just the dragon characters in the general plot playing a mocking role. He has not been affected by them in the least. Then he shook his head and turned back to look at Doberman, who was standing in front of him at the moment. Doberman didn't have any personal grievances with Hayden, no contact, no friendship. But at this moment, the cheers from the crowd off the court made him excited, feeling that his whole body on the stage was emitting light. He also made up his mind to win the game in one go. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. It has been sunny for Malanfado these days, the hot sun is shining above their heads, and the surrounding air looks a little distorted. At this moment, when Hayden was not paying attention to others, a thin chill gradually emerged. Begin. At this time, suddenly, the instructor signaled the start of the game. As soon as he came up, Doberman 2 immediately activated it without even thinking about it, and then withdrew back, choosing to open the distance between him and Hayden as much as possible. In the last Hayden game, he was standing off the court and watched the whole game without losing a second. He was afraid that Hayden would use that trick as soon as he came up, and he attacked in an instant. Advertisement. For this reason, he can only choose to distance himself from Hayden before he takes a shot. If you want to move at that speed, The burden on your body cannot be small, and there will inevitably be certain side effects. Opening the distance means that he has to run longer and heavier burden. Doberman 2, who used his left-handed sword, held his sword in front of him at this time, and fixed his eyes on Hayden, who was still standing in place after the start, and countless thoughts flashed in his heart. And Hayden, yesterday's sequelae made him no longer dare to use round casually. I planned to change my tactics today, but I didn't expect. Staring at the movements that Doberman made, Hayden was a little bit confused, why he just hid so far as if he saw some monsters. But Hayden didn't think about it anymore, pulling out the sleeve Baishui behind him, and directly attacking Doberman 2. As early as the instructor hadn't called the start, Hayden had already relieved Shu Baishui for a while. Release half of the power by deliberately shouting out half of the initial solution, and extend the time for the initial solution as much as possible.
Hayden deliberately held the sleeve Baishui downward, and the ground touched by the tip of the knife formed a thin line of ice. In the scorching temperature, everyone off the court felt a bit of coolness, and the chill drifted from the court to the crowd. Some sharp eyes immediately noticed the changes made by Hayden and couldn't help exclaiming. As Hayden got closer, the oppression he brought to Doberman 2 grew stronger. Doberman 2 stared at Hayden, who was approaching him, his throat moved and swallowed. In the dark, he seemed to realize that Hayden did not intend to use yesterday's trick. Come on, he couldn't help but said to himself. Boom, suddenly, Hayden rushed straight towards Doberman with a cold gust of wind. In an instant, Doberman also wielded the sword moves he had wielded tens of thousands of times. Positive cut, advertisement, ice frost falls. At once. Hayden, who was getting close, cut out the white snow from the top down, and the pure white blade slashed the long sword that Doberman held tightly. The swords cried together, as if time had frozen in this moment. The strength of both of them was used in this blow. Hayden's arms suddenly burst into blue veins, his face was slightly hideous. Doberman was also uncomfortable, his feet on the ground were already sunk in the nest. He is not as weak as Ramen. Look at me blocking this trick, he roared in his heart, just to hold on. However, Shu Baishui's cold air quietly intruded into Doberman's sword, freezing layer by layer from the inside. Suddenly, Doberman's sword shattered in the position where Hayden's sleeve was hit by the snow, and he was caught off guard, and Hayden slashed into the ground with too much force. After a second, the compacted sandy ground was cut open, turning into a piece of ice in the blink of an eye. I lost? Everything happened too quickly, and Doberman was in a state of confusion in his mind. How could he still be able to withstand it in the first second, and why would his sword break in the next second? He fixed his eyes and saw that only half of the long sword was left, and the broken position was covered by a silver-white thing, and it seemed to exude a chill. The crowd in the audience who noticed this phenomenon was also silent, no one said anything, and his eyes stared as if they had never seen it before. In the last game, Hayden only used that move to solve the opponent neatly. He hadn't seen his other tricks. In this game, he only used a different trick to solve the opponent. But the effect of this trick is too scary. After a while, the instructor stepped forward to announce the result. Hayden wins. Chapter 23 The Golden Lion escapes from prison. The winner takes all. Recommendation ticket, collection. Previous chapter. Next chapter advertisement. Hayden woke up early at dawn with the breeze. After winning Doberman yesterday, he played several games in a row. In the end, only Hayden and the Quincy Dalmesia who used up Smog's energy were left. There is only this game in today's time. The winner takes away the temporarily unidentified devil fruit or a good knife with 50 jobs. It is ranked in the top 12 jobs with the supreme big knife, and a good knife below the 21 jobs with the big knife. It is ranked in the third category, sharp knife in. Hayden is not so eager for the championship for devil fruit or sharp knife. But after he crossed over, he seemed to feel that there was something missing in his heart. The feeling of forgetting seems to drive him to grow stronger with an inexplicable impulse, just like a traveler walking in the desert. The desire for water without a drop of liquid on his lips for a few days. That being the case, the quickest way to become stronger is to fight with people. Gain experience in battle, forge yourself, you have to use it after training to know your own strength. Quincy Dalmesia, a deterrent opponent, had the physical energy that he hadn't stopped in those 1 or 2 hours of high-speed sports, so Hayden didn't dare to relax a little, and his expression was tense. After he woke up early, he sat cross-legged on the ground. First, he wiped her sleeve Baishui carefully with a flannel twice, and then put her flat on his lap, and his consciousness began to sink into his mind. As usual, my mind is always filled with endless darkness, and disturbing thoughts are floating around. As a person who has passed through and has been bombarded by the huge information of the original world network, he wants to empty his brain and calm down completely, which is really a bit difficult for Hayden. But he wasn't discouraged either. If he wants to get further tiles, he must be truly recognized by Shu Baishui. Every time of Blade Zen, Shu Shiryuki's true posture would go one step further, he told himself this way. Trying to communicate in the inner world, it looks like a dead thing lying flat on his lap, but it is actually Shiryuki's Shu with a conscious soul. Advertisement as early as a few months ago, he seemed to understand one thing after thinking about the instant step practice of hitting a tree and hitting his brain. The power of Zhanpakudao seems to be the same as the system's skill tree. These two things seem to operate separately, as if they can be used if they can discover their own potential power. So it's not that you have to spend points to redeem Su Shiryuki's Wanjia. But even so, he who has read the comics of Reaper knows that Shiryuki's Wanjia, the Wan called open black lens bracket Baishia punishment close black lens bracket, the power after the Wanjia can be regarded as a level that can affect the domain. The soaring cold mist column rose into the sky, and then dispersed. The absolute 0-degree mist freezes everything in the range, and at the same time, even the slightest contact with other people or things will freeze instantly. But, after Hayden tried to read it again, it didn't make any use of it, and no special effects happened.
As expected, the real trigger conditions should be solved, which is to get the approval of Zhanpakudao.
In a blink of an eye time passed. Hayden's daily Blade Zen time is over, and he is about to stand up and walk out of the room. At this time, there was a burst of shouts from the dormitory area outside, as if something terribly big had happened. As soon as I walked out of the house, I saw Small, Dick and Duddy gathered together, standing by the corridor railing. The three of them were looking down at something. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Hayden walked over and asked Small, "Hey, what were they arguing just now?" "Oh, it's Hayden." Small and the three moved away from the newspaper in front of them and noticed that it was Hayden. The legendary big pirate Golden Lion escaped from prison last night. Smog looked a little shocked, and so did Dick and Duddy. Golden Lion. Hayden immediately remembered what the name represents. A person who was once famous as the One Piece King Roger and the White Beard. This world can be regarded as the level of the legendary big pirate. It was written in the newspaper that the Golden Lion cut off his feet to escape from pushing the city. Dick continued to read the newspaper report. Advertisement. The four people suddenly felt awe-inspiring about what Golden Lion did. Hayden, who knew the plot, did not expect to experience such a thing. Cut off your own feet, is this the enlightenment of the legendary great pirate? The reality from the ears, from the front of the eyes, made Hayden a little dazed. This Golden Lion hasn't been locked in for a few years, Dick murmured. Some lost Duddy went on to add. The impact of his uproar at Malinfudo 2 years ago is still visible in some places on the island. Smog didn't know what he was thinking. Now there is a big problem. Thinking of the tragedy of Malinfudo 2 years ago, and thinking of what the Golden Lion would do after being released from prison, Duddy and Dick, who were on the island at the time, were afraid to continue thinking about it. As a result, the speechless four went to the school field after meeting Tina. A group of 5 people who rushed to the campus found that they were basically all there when they walked in. The crowd gathered together, making noisy noises. From the faces of the people who were talking about it, it was obvious that they all knew the news of the Golden Lion's escape from prison, and they were talking about it. After all, the Golden Lion was caught on this island. Even if he is injured now, it is impossible to take revenge directly, but he does not know what it will affect in the future. However, the gathering of people also indicated that everyone wanted to know, Hayden versus Quincy, which of these two people will win the final victory in this duel, but the reward for the winner makes them greedy. After a while, the instructor arrived on time, and after the routine speech, he let Hayden and Crady walk into the middle of the field. Hayden vs Quincy Dalmesia. One is Hayden, who they didn't feel great from the beginning, and the other is Quincy, who has been at the top since entering the training camp. The duel that was about to begin diverted the attention of the crowd, and began to discuss which of the two was more powerful. Quincy must be able to kill Hayden directly, a little brother who admired Quincy suddenly shouted. Advertisement. However, what makes Hayden in the field strange is, "I'll go to Nima. Hayden will definitely freeze Quincy in one move." The voice abruptly came out of the crowd to cheer Hayden. Hayden couldn't help turning his head to look at the crowd watching the battle on the sidelines. Among the crowd, some people were staring in his direction and yelled at him. Others seemed to be attracted by Hayden's posture after winning the next game and began to cheer for him. Damn it! Hayden looked surprised. "I still have fans. Sure enough, as long as you show my demeanor, you can honestly surrender to my sword." He couldn't help feeling of joy in his heart, and he raised his arms to the Tina and others outside the court and waved to a group of fans. At this time, his opponent Quincy, there was no expression on Quincy's face. The cheers and roars in his ears, this noisy environment could not affect his mood at the moment. There is no doubt that Hayden is a tough opponent. His sword skill is a sword skill that can cut out frozen things. This is a troublesome problem. Continue to drag into the protracted battle, and then find the right time to take the enemy. Quincy stared at Hayden, who was one head taller than him, thinking about the strategy of waiting. After the gesture, Hayden turned his attention back to Quincy in front of him. The instructor signaled that the game would start soon, and Hayden and Quincy each took their postures. The game will start soon, and the crucial moment is coming. Chapter 24. Are you a pretender too? Seeking collection, seeking recommendation ticket? Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. At this moment, there was no trace of noise in the audience, as if suffocating. Everyone can feel that the two people standing in the field at this time brought them an unprecedented depression. Even the closest to the two of them, even the instructor with the strength of the lieutenant general, felt the atmosphere change in the air, feeling a little uncomfortable. After that, the instructor immediately announced the start of the game, and then withdrew from the field, standing in front of the other people's teams in the training camp who were watching the game in advance. Knowing the true situation of the two people, he was deeply afraid that the two people would wait for a real fire and spread to too much range. He could just protect them by blocking the front of the students. However, after the instructor announced that the duel had begun, the two of them seemed to have made an appointment in advance, and they were still standing there without moving. The breeze blew over the two facing each other. At this time, Quincy suddenly had a movement. Quincy is not the talkative type, and he has never befriended Hayden, and has nothing to talk about. Immediately after the sudden activation, he rushed toward Hayden's face and shot. The entire right arm is matched with the power supplied by the whole body to concentrate on one point, and the huge fist is wrapped in the power that can hammer into the steel, exploding the air. Bang! Hayden was knocked out, and the place where the two of them touched immediately shook out a shockwave, setting off smoke. Hayden was like a cloth doll in these few seconds, his body tumbling in the air irregularly. Although he was defensive, after reacting in time, he had no time to block Shiryuki with his sleeve. Advertisement. Fortunately, this block just avoided being hit by this powerful punch directly on his body, otherwise the impact would be stronger. After a brief loss of consciousness, Hayden forcibly stabilized the tendency of his body to roll, first stepped heavily on the ground with his right foot, and then plunged into the ground with his sleeve baishui, gradually stopping the stamina of being hit. The half-released sleeve baishui drew an icy road on the ground, and Hayden's feet were covered with white crushed ice. Stay back. At this time, the instructor outside the field was taken aback and immediately ordered, and the students behind him should also quickly retreat as far as possible. It seems that these two people are going to make a lot of noise. Tina, Smog and others who had a good relationship with Hayden noticed Hayden's current situation, and the nerves in his heart suddenly became tense. They felt like walking on a tightrope, nervous and worried. This guy Quincy, as soon as he came up, used a power that was completely different from the strength shown in the previous games. Did this guy actually release water when compared to me? Smog squinted his eyes and stared at Quincy, who was a little far away from them, and thought to himself in his heart. Cough, cough, cough. Although the blow was blocked, the feeling it brought to Hayden was still stuck in his chest, and the sudden breath made him a little bit out of breath. Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Immediately after he didn't wait for him to strike back. Queedy had crossed a long distance between them, and now he was about 3 or 4 meters away. At this moment, Hayden, whose adrenaline was soaring, could see the fierceness on his face, his clenched fists, his tight arm muscles, and his feet stomping on the newly formed ice road. Queedy's speed and strength at the moment have surpassed the strength he revealed a few days ago, and at the same time, it also made Hayden feel so embarrassed for the first time. Damn it, you're still coming, Hayden couldn't help it. Immediately, the right hand holding the handle of the knife turned to the right, and the sleeve Baishui inserted into the ground immediately released her ability. Shubai shouted in his mouth. Suddenly, the sound of crackling, that instantaneous ice formation sounded. Advertisement: the cold current enough to freeze everything rushed into the ground, and an ice road that was far more frightening than the long slender ice road was formed, extending straight in the direction before Hayden. In less than a second, the ice road has spread to Queedy's feet at this moment. Unfortunately, just when he was about to switch between the left and right feet, his left foot was frozen, and his right foot was just hanging in the air. However, it does not matter. Han Bing immediately followed his left foot and climbed onto the body. Papa, the chilling Queedy didn't even think about it, and instinctively stepped on the ice with his right foot, breaking the ice block that trapped him. After the next breath, Hayden's combos followed. The pure white blade that was swung vigorously was aimed at Queedy's chest and cut out accurately, and the cold air on the blade drew a beautiful arc between them. Iron. Clang, the sleeve of Baishui in her hand only cut a spark on Queedy's chest. Suddenly, the two were in a stalemate in this second. Hayden's expression was stunned. Did he make a mistake? Why did he hear the word, iron, in his ears? Then I saw Queedy in front of him speak. It's okay, if I didn't know how to get iron, I would definitely lose this time. His voice was low and he didn't look like an underage guy. Damn me? Hayden got a response and immediately bounced away from him. This LYB actually hit a hand, and Hayden, who held the knife rest in front of him, couldn't help but vomit. But his mind was circling quickly, and since Shu Baishui couldn't cut him, let Shu Baishui's ability freeze him. And Queedy, who was opposite him, smashed the ice block that was formed in the position where Shi Shui had just cut with his hand. After trying to get the power of Shiryuki's sleeve, he said, I recognize your strength, although it will be a bit tricky to win this game, but if the degree is high, then I will accept the victory, he finished calmly. Advertisement. Hayden was a little stunned for the first time. He didn't expect to see you look like a 5'3" rough and honest person at your young age. As a result, you also live in a pretend to be a criminal? Oh. You just need to wait. Hayden immediately responded, finally, you will fall to the ground, and you can only see my smile after winning you from the corner of your eye. Really? Queedy said silently. For a while, the atmosphere around the two of them fell into a short, weird silence again. At the same time, the instructor and them who saw the bad situation and made them retreat far away can only notice the two figures of Hayden and Queedy. They can't hear their conversation, so they don't know that it seems to stop. What are the two coming down talking about? The anxious scene made Tina, Smog and others anxious in their hearts. Queedy's momentum is very strong, and Hayden's is not bad. It's just that after Hayden's knife hit Cuddy's body, it seemed as if he couldn't get in. After that, they only saw Hayden pulling a distance, and then the two fell silent. Boom. At this moment, Huo's restarted Queedy broke the silence. The muscles of his legs were stronger than before, and just at the start, the ground behind him burst into a small hole. Under the reaction force generated by the explosion, the speed of movement also increased a lot. And that also means nothing. When the ascent speed and quality are the same, the attack power will naturally be proportional to the speed. With a faster speed, it has an overwhelming increase in attack power. Queedy's body seemed to be parallel to the ground, as if a bullet pointed at Hayden and shot straight past. 9% Chapter 25 Queedy spirally broke his back and leg. Seeking collection, seeking recommendation ticket. Previous chapter. Next chapter. Advertisement. Boom. Queedy, who rushed straight forward with great speed, hit Hayden's blade, and Hayden once again blocked Queedy's attack with his sleeve Baishui. But the difference is that Hayden reacted this time. Both feet were deeply rooted on the ground beneath them, and only a few meters back to restrain the backlash. After regaining his senses, Hayden immediately ejected, and Baishui slashed over with his sleeve in his right hand. Quincy, who stood still, quickly avoided his chopping, dodged to the right, dodged Hayden's sharp blade, and then hit back. His left foot jumped up, his body rotated, and his right leg slashed directly, slashing Hayden's right arm like a tomahawk. Hayden's right arm hit the leg firmly, and he couldn't help groaning. His entire body lost support to the ground, and his feet were off the ground. However, he did not release the sleeve Shiryuki he was holding with his right hand, nor did he stop his next attack. Hayden resisted the pain from the nerves in his arm, and followed the falling motion of the arm, gripping the handle of the knife, turning the blade, and cutting across towards Quincy's lower half. But the result expected in his mind did not happen. The follower banged again. Just thinking about his own attack, did not think of Quincy's next move in the last second. Shu Baishui waved nothing but hit nothing. I saw the crowd watching the battle from afar. At this moment, Quincy, who was already in the air, twisted his whole body like a twist. After spinning around in the air, his right foot cut Hayden's back again, centering the front sight. Advertisement. The power was so powerful that the moment Hayden, facing down, hit the ground, a thick smoke was aroused. The flat ground turned into a big pit that shattered like a spiderweb in the next second, and Hayden was lying in the center of the pit. Cough, cough, cough. At this moment, Hayden, who had lost consciousness, choked dark red blood in his mouth, slowly sliding down the corner of his mouth. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Hayden, whose brain was frozen, woke up immediately, and immediately felt the sensation transmitted to him from all over his body at this moment. As if his whole body had been beaten with a hammer once, the most severe pain was the place where he was hit just now. And his opponent was standing on the edge of the pit with his chest folded and silently watching Hayden lying on the ground. At this time, the smoke gradually dissipated, and the crowd watching the battle from a distance noticed what had just happened. After Quincy's full blow just now, they could no longer see Hayden, they could only see Quincy still standing there. What happened? Read more at hotmtlnovel.zi. Where's that guy Hayden? All the members of the training camp have similar expressions on their faces, and they are eager to know the next result. Damn! I didn't try so hard to lose. The unspeakable pain became incomparably clear at this moment, as if he had entered the sensible Hayden on the other hand, roaring in the vague mouth. He touched the ground in front with his left hand, grabbed the falling sleeve Baishui, and slowly supported him with both hands. Up to now, Quincy, whose clothes are slightly damaged, said indifferently at this moment, "Give up, your strength is okay." In his line of sight, Hayden, who was already embarrassed, actually wanted it, struggling to get up. Although what Quincy said didn't seem to mean anything else, in Hayden's ears, he couldn't help but think of his experience in the past 6 months. Advertisement. I have worked so hard to persevere for so long, but I don't want to be so weak and lose in a shit naval recruit barracks. UTM must force me. Tui. Hayden, who was standing up straight, spit out the blood remaining in his mouth. I hope you have something to use next, otherwise, then you will stop here. The appearance of Hayden in front of him really made Quincy wonder what else could he do now. Destroy yourself. Rondinini's black dog, it will burn up completely after reading it, and cut your own throat. 9 bound Dao blow. Seeing Quincy standing next to the pit, Hayden immediately put his sleeve Baishui on the ground and sang silently in his mouth. In a short time, the binding effect appeared on Quincy's body. With the gradual increase of his own spiritual pressure, the power of Hayden's skills released at this time also increased. The unsuspecting Quincy caught this unexpected move from Hayden. The body immediately stiffened, and his unable to exert himself began to slowly fall into the pit. He could only watch the ground getting closer and closer to him, and fell to the ground unpreparedly. After a plop, Cuddy immediately fell face down on the slope of the pit, rolling towards Hayden on the dusty ground. Hayden did not hesitate, ignoring the pain in his whole body, kicking his feet forward, and pulling out the sleeve Shiryuki that was stuck on the ground while sprinting. In an instant, there was only a distance of 3 or 4 meters. Immediately, Hayden rushed to Quincy, who was lying on the ground, and he was still in a stiff state at the moment. Don't blame me now. Advertisement. Shu Baishui's blade suddenly gathered the spiritual pressure transmitted from his arm, forming a cold current that was enough to freeze everything and entangled the blade. After an instant, Bai Shui raised his sleeves in his hands and jumped hard with both feet, and his body vacated. At the moment in front of him, Quidi still maintained the posture of his body lying on the ground, and Hayden leapt up to block his light and hide in the shadow. The second of extreme ice skates. The cold air all over the blade freezes the moisture in the atmosphere centered on Hayden's body, blade and the tip of the blade, forming a straight line like a laser, and it is as sharp as a laser. Hayden slashed straight at Cuddy under him. However, unexpectedly, Quidi broke through the shackles of Dao Dao. His right arm stretched towards Hayden's slash, and the blade immediately cut into the muscles of the arm, and the blade stopped at the position of the arm bone. Hayden's offensive was blocked by Quidi with his empty hands. However, the cold air also invaded his arms, and the freezing trend spread, gradually dissipating toward his whole body. Quidi, who was stuck in Hayden's attack, also slowly supported him, and at this moment an angry flame flashed in his eyes. He couldn't believe the sights Hayden saw. But Quidi used his body to pick up my blade? And I haven't cut in yet? Standing up, Quidi couldn't help raising his right hand with Hayden raising the knife, his expression a little confused. Cat fruit, jaguar form. Quidi spit out these words. Then, Quidi suddenly changed in Hayden's eyes.